Emma gave a triumphant smile, thinking she was winning, unaware that her actions would eventually lead to disaster. My name is Sally, I'm 32 years old, and I work as a seamstress at a TV and film studio, fixing costumes. The costumes range from fancy period pieces to modern clothes used in current shows. My job involves adjusting designs to fit both the era and the actors, as well as repairing any damage from filming. I mostly work with sewing machines and irons, and although my main job is fixing clothes, I can also make garments from scratch, a skill I learned by watching my mom when I was young. I love my work, even if the hours are unpredictable and the demands high. I hope to keep working here for the rest of my career. I met my husband, Joe, at the studio, where he worked taking care of the actors. Joe is 3 years older than me, and since we saw each other every day, we gradually grew closer. 2 years after meeting, despite our busy schedules, we got married. Just as we started our new life together, my mother fell ill and passed away, so we had to delay our wedding plans. We'd originally planned a small ceremony at a local church with only family, but after postponing it, we decided to save for a bigger wedding and honeymoon. Since our work hours were so irregular, we decided it would be wasteful to rent a place just to sleep. Instead, we moved in with Joe's mother, Emma, to save money for our wedding and honeymoon. I had lost my father early on, and Joe had lost his father too, so he was concerned about leaving his mom alone. I wanted to get along with Emma, but looking back, that's when my troubles began. Emma didn't seem interested in getting along with me. To her, I was like a thief who had taken her son away. Once we moved in, the harassment began. If I cleaned, she would nitpick. Sally, this place is filthy, over here, and over there, too. I wonder what kind of upbringing you had. Your parents must have been something else. I put up with it, cleaning so much that my hands became sore and cracked. Emma was unbelievably strict about chores, from cleaning to laundry to cooking. No matter how exhausted I was, if she found any small flaw, she'd make me redo everything with a calm, cruel expression. The more worn out I became, the harsher her criticisms grew. I remember scrubbing the sink all night, feeling that nothing I did would ever satisfy her. Over time, Emma insisted I handle all the housework alone, and it became too much to balance with my job. Eventually, I arranged to work from home, hoping this would make things easier, but it only made her demands worse. Every day felt like being Cinderella, constantly busy with housework. Is the laundry done? The upstairs curtain has a tear, fix it. Since you're good at sewing, right? She'd say. I'm sorry, Emma, I have urgent work. Could I fix it on the weekend? I'd reply. What are you saying? The neighbors could see it like that. Fix it now. I found myself working while doing housework or doing chores while working, sometimes staying up all night to keep up. The work never seemed to end, and Emma seemed to take pleasure in watching me wear myself out. Our relationship became that of a mistress and a maid. I did everything around the house while she continued to demand more. I had too much pride to easily share my struggles with Joe. I tried my best to keep up with my duties, but the real challenge wasn't just the physical exhaustion, it was the mental strain that wore me down. Sometimes, Emma would invite the neighbors over for lunch, which felt like a nightmare. She'd criticize me even more harshly in front of them, and I'd overhear her saying things like, "She's such a terrible daughter-in-law. I have to teach her every day. My son may be blind to it, but I'm not. She's just so rude and lacks any common sense." The neighbors would laugh and agree, and I'd think to myself, who's really the one lacking common sense? I could handle chores, but the hurtful words stayed with me, and I felt like I was reaching my breaking point. If things went on like this, I worried I might lose my mind. As if Emma's behavior wasn't enough, Joe's older sister, Sarah, made things worse. She's 38 and lives nearby with her boyfriend. To be honest, the best way to describe Sarah is stingy. She'd often show up for lunch unannounced, likely to save money. Since she didn't warn me, I couldn't prepare her portion ahead of time, so she'd just eat whatever I had made and then leave. Sarah acted like everything in the house was hers. She'd take whatever she wanted without asking. "Oh, perfect. I'm out of tissues. I'll take these," she'd say, even if I'd just bought them for Emma. If I tried to say something, like, "But Sarah, I bought those for Emma," she'd glare at me and say, "You're always home, aren't you? Just go buy more." Sarah was just like her mother, and I couldn't understand how Joe had turned out so different. The biggest problem was when Sarah took ingredients for dinner without asking. Each time, I'd have to stop everything and go shopping again. One day, I'd had enough. I asked, "Sarah, could you please tell me before you take something?" Later, she told Emma, twisting my words, Emma confronted me, saying, "Did you tell Sarah not to come over anymore?" "No, I didn't say that," I replied, but Emma just shot back, "So you're calling Sarah a liar?" Stuck between Sarah's lies and Emma's cruelty, I felt completely trapped. Dealing with Emma alone was hard enough, but together, they made life unbearable. One day, as I passed by their room, I overheard them talking. Sarah said loudly, "It's like having a free maid. How nice. I wish I could have one at my house too." Hearing myself referred to as a maid stung deeply. I already felt like one, but having it said out loud was unbearable. Something inside me snapped. That night, I finally opened up to Joe. "I can't do this anymore. I've been patient, but I can't live with Emma any longer. Please, let's move out." After a moment, Joe agreed. "We've saved enough. Let's move out soon." "Really?" I said, feeling tears of relief. "I'll start looking for a place right away." Little did we know, Emma had overheard our conversation, and this would lead to her strange behavior later on. From that day, my life felt brighter. I had one big dream. I wanted to wear a wedding dress I'd made myself, especially since sewing was my passion. I shared this with Joe, and feeling motivated, I ordered fabric online and started working on the dress in secret. It gave me something positive to focus on. One day, Sarah dropped by unexpectedly and saw me sewing the dress. "Oh wow, a wedding dress. It must be nice to have your own dress," she said. Then she added, "Hey, Sally, I'm getting married in 2 months. Make my dress too, would you?" "Really?" I replied, a bit taken aback. "Yeah, renting is such a waste of money. I want to keep costs down for my wedding, so please help me out." This was typical Sarah, always trying to save money. I hesitated, but eventually agreed to make her dress since she would cover the cost of the materials. Since our wedding was still a while away, I decided to focus on Sarah's dress first. "Keep this a secret from Mom," Sarah told me. It turned out Sarah planned to tell Emma she was renting the dress, hoping Emma would give her money to cover the rental fee, whatever she paid me for materials. She was set on getting back. Her stinginess was almost impressive. I even mentioned this to Joe, who said, "Once my sister decides on something, she won't back down." "I'm sorry, but it'd really help if you could make the dress for her." I didn't mind too much. Feeling positive, I smiled and said, "Leave it to me, I'll do my best." I saw it as good practice for making my own dress and a way to improve my relationship with Sarah. I dove into the dressmaking process, working on it between house chores and my main job. Emma must have noticed, as she would sometimes peek into my room to see what I was doing. With Sarah's wedding approaching fast, I was nearly done with the dress. Then one day, Emma came into my room with an unusual, cheerful smile. "You're working hard today, aren't you? Aren't you tired?" she asked. "Yes, a bit," I replied, feeling a little uneasy at her sudden friendliness. "I'll make us some coffee. Why don't you take a break?" she offered. "Really? That would be wonderful. Thank you," I said, surprised. Emma left, humming, but something felt off. Emma making coffee for me? That was unusual, but I brushed the feeling aside and went back to work, adding the final touches of lace. Despite it being Sarah's dress, I was putting real care into it. A while later, I smelled coffee and heard Emma knock at the door. "Sally, may I come in?" "Yes," I said, looking up. Emma entered, carrying a tray filled with cups and saucers, enough for a full party. Her arms trembled as she brought the heavy tray closer. Suddenly, she pretended to trip, and in an instant, cups and saucers went crashing, with coffee spilling everywhere. For a moment, I was stunned. My nearly finished dress was now splattered with coffee stains, like a giraffe pattern on the yellow fabric. I gasped, horrified. Emma flashed a brief smile, before putting on a concerned face. "Oh no, I'm so sorry, it was an accident. Are you hurt? Wait, is that a dress? I thought you were working on old fabric scraps." I stood there, frozen in shock. Then Emma, pretending to be sympathetic, said, "Oh dear, you can't have a wedding with a dress like this, can you?" My suspicions were confirmed. Emma wanted to ruin my dress, knowing it would ruin our wedding plans and delay our move. Swallowing my anger, I rushed to the bathroom, trying to rinse out the coffee stains before they set. Emma followed, watching me struggle with a malicious grin. "Need any help?" she asked. "No, I'm fine," I replied coldly, fighting a mix of anger and panic. Just then, Sarah appeared behind Emma and asked, "What's going on? Are you bullying Sally again?" Emma, trying to look innocent, replied, "Oh, I just accidentally spilled coffee on her dress." Sarah's eyes widened. What? That's my dress. What am I supposed to do? My wedding is in 2 weeks. Emma was stunned. Yours? I thought, wait, why didn't you tell me she was making your dress? As the two of them argued, I kept rinsing the dress, ignoring their ridiculous exchange. After all, I'd spent months working on this dress for my sister-in-law, and I wasn't going to give up on it now. As I washed the dress, I thought back over everything that had happened. I hadn't told anyone that I was making the dress for Sarah, so Emma must have thought it was mine. If she had known it was for her own daughter, she probably wouldn't have tried to ruin it. To Emma, I was always just a thief who had stolen her beloved son. She couldn't stand the thought of someone she viewed as merely a maid taking Joe away from her. She must have thought that if she sabotaged our wedding, Joe would stay. Her bitterness had driven her to this absurd plan. Sarah, meanwhile, was furious, shouting at Emma, "How could you do this? Everything is ruined. I can't believe my own mother would destroy my wedding." Emma stammered, "I'm sorry, Sarah, I didn't know it was your dress. I wouldn't have done it if I'd known." But it was clear she meant what she'd done. Then, a voice interrupted, calm yet firm, "So you thought it was Sally's dress and ruined it on purpose?" We all turned. Joe was standing there, looking at us with a mix of sadness and disappointment. "Oh, Joe, when did you get here?" Emma tried to cover her shock. Joe shook his head. "I've been watching. I saw everything. You knew Sally was working hard on that dress, and you still ruined it. That's just cruel." "Joe, it's not like that. I didn't mean," Emma tried to explain. "Don't make excuses," Joe snapped. Emma fell silent. She seemed completely stunned, probably never expecting her son, whom she adored, to speak to her that way. Joe continued, his voice steady but filled with sadness. "Sally's been patient all this time, for my sake, hoping things would get better with you. She's endured everything, because you're my mother." I felt my eyes fill with tears. I had often thought Joe was too soft, too reluctant to stand up to her, but in that moment, I saw his strength and loyalty, and I loved him even more. Joe turned back to Emma, saying firmly, "This can't go on. Sally and I are moving out as soon as possible. We plan to stay until the wedding out of respect for you, but I won't ask Sally to stay here anymore. If this keeps going, who knows what might happen next." Emma looked up, horrified. "Danger? I would never put her in danger." "How can you say that?" Joe replied, his voice full of quiet anger. "You ruined months of her work without a second thought. It could have been worse." Joe's face was an expression I had never seen before, sadness mixed with anger and deep disappointment. Emma, usually quick to lash out, was left speechless, with tears streaming down her face. Even Sarah, normally defensive, stood stunned, glancing between Joe and their mother. After this, everything changed. Sarah had to cancel her wedding due to the damage and loss of the dress, and since it was so close to the date, none of the money was refunded. Emma had paid for most of it, so Sarah didn't lose any money herself, but she was furious at her mother. The sudden cancellation also angered her fiancé and his family, leading to a breakup shortly afterward. For all that followed, Sarah continually blamed Emma, and Emma seemed to finally regret the consequences of her thoughtless harassment. The shock of Joe's words had clearly affected her, leaving her much quieter. After Joe and I moved out, Emma occasionally contacted us, but only to ask for money. One reason Emma didn't want us to leave was financial. While we lived together, we helped cover household expenses, and Emma relied on our support since her only income was her pension. But each time she called asking for money after we left, Joe stood firm. "Mom, you should look for a job," he'd say. "There are plenty of options, and it's important for all of us to be independent. Please, let us live our lives." Emma would beg him not to abandon her, but Joe remained resolute, feeling that it was necessary for our well-being. Eventually, Emma found work as a janitor in a—
Hey there, I'm Stacy, and I'm 37 years old. My husband, Eric, and I were throwing a party at our house to welcome back my brother-in-law, Uncle Isaac. He had just come home after spending 5 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Yep, you heard that right, prison. But before you jump to conclusions about him or our family, let me tell you, Isaac was innocent. He got caught up in something he had nothing to do with. It took 5 long years of legal battles to prove his innocence and set him free. So you can imagine how excited we all were to have him back with us. The party was buzzing, everyone having a great time. Isaac was in the spotlight, catching up with everyone and sharing stories from his time in prison. He had a special bond with my daughter, Wendy, who used to be really close to him before all this mess happened. Laughter and lively chats echoed through the house. The smell of yummy food filled the air as we all enjoyed a feast fit for royalty. It was a special time for our family, filled with happiness and togetherness, which made my heart feel warm. Once the party ended and everyone left, we were still buzzing with excitement. We were thankful to see Isaac back with us, alive, happy, and healthy after his unfair time in prison. Life went back to normal, and it felt like the drama in our family had calmed down, at least for a little while. But sadly, that happy feeling didn't last long. A couple of days after the party, I was sitting in the living room, lost in a book, when Wendy burst in looking scared and angry. I quickly put my book down and went to her side, worried about what had happened. "Wendy, what's the matter? You look really scared. Tell me what's going on," I said, my voice filled with worry. Tears were rolling down Wendy's cheeks as she struggled to catch her breath. "Mom, I found something. A camera. Hidden in one of my plants." My heart raced and I felt a surge of fear. A hidden camera in my daughter's room. It made my blood boil. But I had to stay calm for Wendy. We hurried to her room, my mind racing with questions. And there it was, tucked away among the leaves of her favorite plant. A tiny camera, invading her privacy. How long had it been there? I felt a mix of disgust, fear, and anger rising inside me. I wasted no time and called Eric right away, my voice shaky with a mix of feelings as I shared the shocking news. "Eric, you won't believe what I just found out. There's a hidden camera in Wendy's room. We need to act fast." Eric sounded both concerned and furious. "I'm coming over, Stacy. We're not going to let this slide. Our daughter deserves her privacy, and whoever did this will pay for it." While we waited for Eric, Wendy clung to me, her tears soaking my shirt. She blamed herself for not noticing the camera sooner, but I assured her it wasn't her fault. I promised to support her through this unsettling situation. When Eric arrived, his eyes reflected our emotions, anger barely contained beneath a calm surface. We carefully examined the camera, searching for any clues that could lead us to the person responsible. It was a betrayal of trust that hurt deeply, and we were determined to uncover the truth. The invasion of our safe space shattered the feeling of security we had worked so hard to build for our family. We needed to take action quickly, not only to protect our daughter, but also to restore our peace of mind. If there was one hidden camera in Wendy's room, who knew how many more might be lurking elsewhere in our home? "Don't worry, Wendy. We won't stop until we find out who did this," I reassured her. "Thanks, Mom. Can I please nap in the guest room?" "I don't feel comfortable in mine right now, and I'm really tired," Wendy asked. "Of course, sweetheart. You do what you need to feel safe." "I'm so sorry this happened," I replied gently. Wendy headed to the guest room, likely wanting some time alone after her privacy had been violated. I couldn't shake off the feeling of malice. Who could do something like this? We decided to review the footage, gather any evidence we could find, and involve the authorities if necessary. Nobody messes with our family like this. Though I was shaken, I found comfort in knowing Eric and I were on the same page. We sat together in the quiet of our living room, the seriousness of the situation weighing heavily on us. Our minds raced, trying to figure out who could have planted the camera in Wendy's room. As we talked it through, one name kept coming up: Isaac. I broached the subject carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. The timing is hard to ignore. The camera was likely planted during the family gathering, and who had the opportunity? Isaac. "Stacy, you can't seriously think Isaac would do something like this. Yes, he's had his problems, but he's not a creep. He's my brother, for crying out loud," Eric protested. I understood Eric's reaction completely. Family bonds are strong, and suspecting a relative of such a violation feels almost unthinkable. But I couldn't ignore the clues that seemed to point towards Isaac's involvement during the family gathering. Gathering my thoughts, I spoke softly but firmly. "Eric, I know it's tough to consider, but we have to face reality. Isaac spent a lot of time with Wendy at the gathering, which suggests he may have had some interest in her. Plus, he just got out of prison. People change, and their experiences can influence their actions. Our priority is to protect our daughter, even if it means questioning those closest to us." Eric looked weighed down by the situation, torn between loyalty and the evidence. Eventually, he nodded slowly, his voice filled with a mix of resignation and discomfort. "I don't want to believe it, Stacy, but you're right. The timing and circumstances are hard to ignore. We have to find out the truth for Wendy's sake. The idea of confronting Isaac about the betrayal weighed heavily on our minds, but we knew it was necessary. The safety of our home and our daughter depended on it. As we braced ourselves for the tough conversation ahead, we promised to approach it with care and empathy. Finding the truth was crucial not just for our own peace, but to protect Wendy from any further harm. Days passed, and Eric struggled with conflicting feelings, loyalty to his brother versus the nagging suspicion in the back of his mind. The tension strained our relationship with Isaac and cast a shadow over our family as we grappled with uncertainty. A plan started to take shape in my mind. Risky, but it felt necessary to catch the culprit. I shared my idea with Eric, suggesting that hosting another family gathering could be the key to uncovering the truth. Think about it, Eric. Whoever planted that camera might try to retrieve it during another family event. This gathering, meant for bringing us together, could give us the chance to catch them in the act. Eric hesitated, still torn between his loyalty to his brother and the need to uncover the truth. But as I explained the urgency of our situation, he eventually agreed that we had to explore every option before getting the authorities involved. It was a tough choice, but necessary to protect our family and regain our sense of safety. I called Tina, Isaac's wife, to propose the idea of another family gathering. "Hey Tina, we were thinking of having another family get-together. Are you and Isaac free to join us?" Tina's response was surprisingly enthusiastic. She eagerly accepted, expressing her excitement for another gathering. It struck me as a bit odd, since she was usually more reserved, but I brushed it off, thinking she was just happy for family time. With the plans in motion, Eric and I focused on getting everything ready. Our home buzzed with anticipation and tension. We checked every corner for signs of intrusion, aiming to create a sense of normalcy while secretly preparing to catch the culprit. The stakes were high as the day of the gathering drew near, and our family's future hung in the balance. I felt a mix of nerves and determination. We were stepping into the unknown, but we were prepared to face whatever came our way to keep our daughter safe and our home secure. When the day arrived, our home filled with familiar faces once more. Excitement buzzed in the air, but underneath, tension simmered. Uncle Isaac, ever charming, greeted everyone warmly, but Eric and I couldn't shake our suspicions. They loomed over us, casting a shadow on the festivities. To ensure Wendy's safety, we made the tough call to keep her away from the gathering, arranging a sleepover with a friend without revealing our concerns. With her gone, our focus sharpened, and we kept a watchful eye on anyone near her room. As the party started, laughter and chatter masked our true intentions. Eric and I played the part of hosts while secretly watching for any suspicious behavior. Our detective skills were in full swing. As the night went on, the music and dancing created a lively atmosphere, masking our true intentions. But amidst the celebration, I couldn't ignore Tina's strange behavior. She kept excusing herself, rushing off to the bathroom with an unusual urgency. My instincts kicked in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Driven by curiosity, I decided to approach her. When Tina headed towards the bathroom once more, I followed quietly, my heart racing. But instead of going inside, she turned and entered Wendy's room. Panic surged through me. I knew I had to confront her, to uncover the truth behind her actions. Stepping forward, I called out her name, my voice tinged with both accusation and concern. "Tina, what are you doing in Wendy's room?" Startled, Tina spun around, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. But there was no escaping the truth. The tension between us thickened, heavy with unspoken accusations. "I asked you a question, Tina. What are you doing in my daughter's room?" Tina's facade cracked, tears welling in her eyes. Her voice shook as she said, "I was just looking for Wendy. I was surprised she wasn't with us for the party." "You were going through her drawers," I pointed out, my tone unwavering. Tina looked down, realizing her hands were still in the drawer she'd been searching. I can explain." "Save it." The person we least expected, the one we had staunchly defended, had betrayed our trust. The room swirled with a whirlwind of disbelief and disappointment. I motioned for Eric to join me, and he rushed over, assuming we had caught Isaac in Wendy's room. But his expression turned to shock when he saw it was Tina. "You planted that camera, didn't you? Why, Tina? Why would you do something like this?" Eric demanded, his voice laced with anger and pain. Without hesitation, Eric called Isaac over to Wendy's room, his tone firm and commanding. Isaac, sensing the urgency, quickly joined us, confusion written all over his face. As Isaac stepped into the room, his gaze fell on Tina, tears streaming down her cheeks. Before anyone could say another word, Eric quietly closed the door, shielding the rest of the party from the unfolding drama. Taking a deep breath, I steadied my voice as I began to explain everything. I recounted the shocking discovery of the camera in Wendy's room, the invasion of their privacy that had shattered their trust. My words hung heavy in the air, the truth weighing down the room. We planned this gathering, Isaac, to catch whoever planted the camera. And to be honest, we initially suspected you. Bro, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have doubted you, especially after everything with prison. Eric interjected, his voice filled with regret. But it was mostly me who accused you, Isaac. I'm truly sorry. After finding Tina here, I realized you weren't involved. Isaac's brows furrowed, confusion clouding his expression as he looked between Stacy, Eric, and Tina. He turned to Tina, seeking answers. Tina, why were you in Wendy's room? What's going on? We caught Tina going through Wendy's things. She's the one who planted the camera. Now that everyone's here, Tina, you need to explain yourself. Why would you do something like this? Tina's eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but Isaac's shock mirrored the confusion in the room. He couldn't understand why Tina would do something so invasive, especially to her own family. Okay, you got me. Yes, I planted the camera in Wendy's room. I was just coming to take it back. We already know that. We caught you. We want to know why, Eric pressed. Because I'm jealous, okay, Tina blurted out. Tina's confession hung heavy in the air, exposing her jealousy for all to see. She admitted, with a mix of shame and frustration, that her actions were driven by envy towards Wendy. She had noticed Isaac and Wendy talking a lot during the last family gathering, and it sparked jealousy within her. She questioned what made Wendy so special, what drew Isaac's attention and affection towards her. Isaac felt the need to defend himself, his voice tinged with defensiveness and genuine concern. Tina, you know I care about Wendy, but not in a weird way. Being her uncle is important to me. I was just checking on her, making sure she was okay. It was out of love and family concern, nothing strange. But why were you always praising Wendy? It made me wonder what was so great about her. Tina countered, her jealousy still evident. So you're upset because I'm proud of being an uncle. Tina, is there something wrong with being proud of my niece? I have every right to support and appreciate Wendy. It's not about playing favorites, it's just genuine love for family. I didn't expect you to react like this. Trying to navigate the emotions in the room, I turned to Tina. What were you hoping to find by planting the camera? What did you think you'd uncover? I just wanted to see how Wendy lives, you know? Maybe if I understood her better and acted like her, I could get the same attention from you, Isaac. I wanted to feel valued like she is. You're acting crazy, Tina. Jealous of a teenager. That's messed up, Isaac snapped, his frustration evident. After an awkward silence that could rival a library, Eric decided to end the party. Good call, I agreed. The last thing we need is to keep partying after discovering Tina's true colors. The resident creep of the year. Once the relatives were gone, it was just Eric and me left to deal with the fallout of Tina's actions. And let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. I unleashed a verbal storm on Tina, making a sailor blush. I mean, who does that? Who plants a camera in their niece's room? Sick, that's who. Isaac looked lost, disappointment written all over his face. I guess he couldn't believe what his wife had done. Can't say I blame him. I'd be equally stunned if my partner turned out to be a lunatic. As the dust settled and our emotions ran dry, Eric and I found ourselves sitting in our once cheerful home, now tainted by one family member's sinister acts. The next day, when Wendy returned, it fell to me to break the news to expose the twisted truth. Tears filled Wendy's eyes as I recounted the violation of her privacy. The poor girl, innocent and unsuspecting, couldn't believe someone in our own family could do something so awful. Mom, I never imagined this could happen, especially from Tina. Seriously. Wendy's disbelief mirrored my own. I shook my head, struggling to comprehend it myself. I know it's hard to believe. Tina's really crossed a line. With Wendy in my arms, her tears staining my shoulder, I made her a promise. We were going to fight back. Pressing charges was just the beginning. Tina needed a reality check, and we were ready to give it to her. Her tearful eyes met mine, seeking reassurance. "But Mom, how is Uncle Isaac doing?" I sighed, the weight of our shattered family hanging heavily in the air. "Honestly, he's struggling. It's hard for him to celebrate his freedom knowing he's married to someone who's acted so terribly." "So, are they getting a divorce?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I hate what she's done to us." "Me too. But right now, our priority is your safety. We're getting a restraining order against Tina so she won't come near you again." We're pressing charges and getting a restraining order against Tina, the one with the camera, and the bond between Isaac and our family, it's strained, shattered by this betrayal. There's an awkward silence between us, a reminder of how far jealousy can go, but we're determined to rebuild and find comfort in those who truly care. The road ahead might be tough, but we're ready to face it. Our family's love will help us through.
"This house is mine now, Mom. You can't come in anymore. Your key won't work, so you might as well throw it away." My daughter laughed when she saw me holding the key. My things were piled up by the door. I didn't understand why my daughter was treating me like this, especially when I was still sad about my husband's death. I felt lost and confused. "My name is Susan, and I'm 60 years old. My husband died recently after being sick for a long time. Many people came to his funeral and shared memories of him. We said goodbye to him with smiles instead of tears, just like he would have wanted. But even with all the support, I still felt very sad. We have a daughter named Emily. She got married and moved far away. And we haven't seen her much lately, even during holidays. She left quickly after briefly coming to her father's funeral. Before Emily got married, she was very close to us. She always said she couldn't stand the idea of living far away from us, even though we encouraged her to live independently after finding a job. She believed that meals tasted better when the family ate together. I usually came home late from work, so we made sure to have meals together on my days off. Maybe Emily said this to cheer up her father, who was getting weaker because of his illness. We were really happy and thankful for Emily's thoughtfulness. Then, Emily suddenly told us she was getting married and quickly got the marriage paperwork done. After that, she left our house in a rush. We were confused by her sudden decision. We only met her partner once and had a brief conversation with them. It seemed like they truly loved each other, and we only wished for Emily's happiness without interfering in their relationship. However, a few months after getting married, Emily stopped talking to us altogether. We worried a lot and kept sending her messages and calling her every day to check if she was okay. But she didn't reply to any of our messages or calls. Finally, when she did answer, she sounded annoyed and told us to stop bothering her. She even joked about only talking to us if we sent her money. During the day, she sounded like she was drunk and slurred her words. My husband heard all of this and just sighed deeply. Emily's behavior seemed to be influenced by her husband, Ole. After that, my husband never brought up Emily again. Some years later, Emily shamelessly asked us for money because she was having financial problems. That was the last time she and her father saw each other. Over the years, my husband and I made many memories together. We traveled and picked up new hobbies whenever he was well enough. Eventually, my husband passed away. When I came back home from his funeral, I was shocked to see movers directed by Emily piling up my belongings outside. She told them to just stack everything in a corner. When she saw me, she said, "Well, Mom, this isn't your home anymore. I've packed up your things. You'll have to find somewhere else to live before it starts raining and everything gets wet." "Emily, why are you doing this? What's going on? Please, tell me what's happening." I was just so confused, not understanding anything. "What's there to explain? You already know, don't you? This house is supposed to go to Emily after me. Don't act like you don't get it." Emily said this, and then a big man stepped out from behind her. It was because of him that Emily changed. His name is Ali, and he's Emily's husband. Meeting him changed Emily completely. We were introduced to him as a regular guy who worked at a company. But later we found out he was involved in shady business stuff. When we learned about this, we couldn't understand how our honest Emily ended up with someone like Ali, and we were really worried. Emily and Ali kept us away from them, but a few years ago, they suddenly came to our house and shamelessly asked my husband for money. It shook me deeply, but my husband stayed calm and mentioned a will that even I didn't know about back then. It clearly said that this house would go to Emily and everything else to me. Now that Dad has passed away, the house belongs to Emily, so outsiders should leave quickly. You have no right to live here. Don't pretend you've forgotten. Ali kicked my things aside and sneered, but you can't just show up here all of a sudden. Seeing my stuff piled outside, I didn't know what to do. I felt completely lost. Now, Ole, don't be so harsh. Mom shouldn't stay here, but we're still family, right? Emily said this as she came closer to me while I held onto the key. Don't be so sad. You'll always be my mom. You can use this key to come to the house anytime. Don't feel too down. Then she took the key from my hand and threw it as far as she could. What's the matter with you? The key flew through the air and disappeared. I was shocked by Emily's unexpected action. Turning back to her, I said, I'm sorry about that. Upon closer inspection, I realized that the key was already useless. I forgot we changed the locks earlier. There was no point in you holding onto it, so I threw it away for you. Don't act like I've done something terrible. It's not that big of a deal. Emily and Ole looked at me in disbelief and burst into laughter. Emily's face, now completely different from before she got married, showed that she would do anything for her own benefit. I felt tears starting to form. Then I remembered my husband's gentle smile, as if he was telling me to stay strong. Emily, I understand what you're trying to say, but you're getting the wrong idea. This isn't the right place to talk. Let's go inside. I urged Emily and Ole to come inside, but they resisted. We're still moving in, and don't act like you're in charge, telling us where to talk. This isn't your house anymore. You need our permission to come in. Ali snapped back. Faced with Ali's rudeness, I insisted. We need to discuss this house. It's not yours yet. I'm just about to explain, Emily interrupted. I've called someone who can explain it clearly, and he'll be here soon. Let's go inside and have some tea. If you keep refusing, I'll call the police. They'll make me say it again. This house doesn't belong to Emily. If you understand, come inside quickly. If you try anything, I'll be the one calling the police, I said firmly, unsettling them a bit. Well, it might be the last time we listen to an old woman's nonsense. You're getting old anyway. We'll hear you out this time. But if you talk nonsense, you'll have to pay for wasting our time, Ali threatened, sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed. Emily gave me a similar glare. It seemed like they had threatened people like this before to get what they wanted. This made me feel sad. Soon, the doorbell rang, and I let a man into the living room. He was the lawyer who had been there when my husband shared the details of the will. You're the lawyer from before, right? What are you trying to say? We've seen the will that says this house goes to Emily, and Dad said so. That's the truth, isn't it? Ali argued. As I mentioned earlier, there was a misunderstanding before. The will includes a condition, and if that condition happens, the inheritance changes, the lawyer clarified. Why are you confusing us with all these complicated terms? Emily responded in frustration. Seeing their confusion, the lawyer took over to explain. A conditional bequest with revocation means the will has conditions. In your father's will, the condition was that Susan could stay in the house as long as she's healthy. Emily would only inherit it if Susan couldn't live there anymore due to health issues or passed away. Your father was very clear about this. Ali and Emily looked completely confused. Did he really say that? Even if he did, we wouldn't remember. What's this talk about revocation? Emily shook her head in disbelief. Okay, then what about those conditions? Ali asked, sounding a bit shaken but still defiant. By trying to kick Susan out of the house, you violated the conditions of the will. Because of that, Emily lost her right to inherit the house, the lawyer explained straightforwardly. Wait. So you're saying I can't inherit just because of that? That's ridiculous. Emily exploded in frustration. That's the essence of this will. Breaking that condition, whether it's minor or major, leads to revocation, the lawyer explained calmly. When did we ever break that condition? Can you prove it? Ali leaned in, clearly trying to intimidate the lawyer. The lawyer cleared his throat. There was a moving truck outside, arranged by you two, wasn't it? You were trying to move your things in and live here without Susan's consent. Don't act like we did something wrong. We told Mom about it. She just forgot and panicked on her own. That's not our fault, Emily protested. Such childish excuses don't work in the adult world. Not only did you move in without permission, but you also threw my belongings outside. Telling me to leave quickly, the lawyer replied sternly. I never said that. You're the one lying. I can't believe my own mother would make up such accusations. If you keep this up, I'll sue you. Do you want that? Being sued by your own daughter is the last thing you want, right? So take back what you said. Emily threatened, her voice filled with anger. The lawyer remained composed and pulled out his phone. We can't retract the truth. Multiple witnesses saw and heard you telling Susan to leave. We've even recorded their testimonies. He played a video with statements from movers and neighbors. Everyone's stories match. They'd all say you two told Susan to leave. You could have paid them to say that. How can we trust this? Stop making a fool of us, Ali accused, but the lawyer ignored him. Instead, he produced a key. Emily, you took the key from Susan and threw it away, which was witnessed by many. I found this key exactly where it was described to be. Changing the locks means Susan can't enter or live here, breaking the condition that she can stay as long as she's healthy. So, you violated the terms of the inheritance. Don't spout whatever you want. If I get serious, I can ensure a lawyer like you never works again. Despite Ali's loud threats, the lawyer remained calm and continued. Therefore, this house will never belong to Emily, and you have no right to live here. Now please remove your belongings and return Susan's immediately. If you delay or try to stay, we'll report a breaking and entering crime to the police. You have 2 hours. Begin now. The lawyer clapped his hands sharply and checked the time on his wristwatch. Police, you say? Such nonsense won't intimidate me, Ali blustered, but the lawyer countered. I'm a professional. This is not a lie. Getting in trouble with the police over this would only cause more problems for you. Even Oli seemed to understand that this wasn't an empty threat. Oh no! Oli and Emily began sweating profusely and quickly got up to start moving their things. It seemed Ole was more bark than bite, like a big guy with no courage. I'm sorry. We'll put everything back right away, so please don't call the police, okay? Please? Emily pleaded sweetly with the lawyer and yelled at the movers outside to reload the truck. But they refused, saying there was no such agreement. In the end, Ollie had to rent a car and somehow managed to load their belongings. Just loading isn't enough. You must put everything back the way it was. If Susan's belongings are damaged or dirty, clean them up. Any damage, and we'll report property damage and seek compensation, the lawyer reiterated, pushing Oli and Emily to restore everything within 2 hours after loading their belongings. After loading their belongings, Emily tearfully asked Oli, "Now that we've packed up, what do we do?" "How should I know? It's because of your dad's strange will," Emily sharply retorted, blaming Oli for not paying attention to the will properly. Despite their argument, they drove off, leaving the scene. I thanked the lawyer profusely and returned to my home filled with memories of my husband, feeling relieved. Later, I heard that Oli and Emily had caused trouble in their previous town and moved to our house, almost like a secret escape. They had targeted me for inheritance money, but now they were gone. Emily, staying with Oli, seemed destined for a life of repeating mistakes. It pained me, but it was the path Emily chose. If they ever regretted their actions and wanted to live honorably, I'd be willing to help. My husband had mentioned something like this. For now, I'll enjoy my time in our shared house, perhaps even trying skydiving, something my husband had wanted to do. Looking up at the stars in the night sky, I felt my husband encouraging me, and I gently wiped away a tear. This house is mine now, Mom. You can't come in anymore. Your key won't work, so you might as well throw it away. My daughter laughed when she saw me holding the key. My things were piled up by the door. I didn't understand why my daughter was treating me like this, especially when I was still sad about my husband's death. I felt lost and confused. My name is Susan, and I'm 60 years old. My husband died recently after being sick for a long time. Many people came to his funeral and shared memories of him. We said goodbye to him with smiles instead of tears, just like he would have wanted. But even with all the support, I still felt very sad. We have a daughter named Emily. She got married and moved far away. And we haven't seen her much lately, even during holidays. She left quickly after briefly coming to her father's funeral. Before Emily got married, she was very close to us. She always said she couldn't stand the idea of living far away from us, even though we encouraged her to live independently after finding a job. She believed that meals tasted better when the family ate together. I usually came home late from work, so we made sure to have meals together on my days off. Maybe Emily said this to cheer up her father, who was getting weaker because of his illness. We were really happy and thankful for Emily's thoughtfulness. Then, Emily suddenly told us she was getting married and quickly got the marriage paperwork done. After that, she left our house in a rush. We were confused by her sudden decision. We only met her partner once and had a brief conversation with them. It seemed like they truly loved each other, and we only wished for Emily's happiness without interfering in their relationship. However, a few months after getting married, Emily stopped talking to us altogether. We worried a lot and kept sending her messages and calling her every day to check if she was okay. But she didn't reply to any of our messages or calls. Finally, when she did answer, she sounded annoyed and told us to stop bothering her. She even joked about only talking to us if we sent her money. During the day, she sounded like she was drunk and slurred her words. My husband heard all of this and just sighed deeply. Emily's behavior seemed to be influenced by her husband, Ole. After that, my husband never brought up Emily again. Some years later, Emily shamelessly asked us for money because she was having financial problems. That was the last time she and her father saw each other. Over the years, my husband and I made many memories together. We traveled and picked up new hobbies whenever he was well enough. Eventually, my husband passed away. When I came back home from his funeral, I was shocked to see movers directed by Emily piling up my belongings outside. She told them to just stack everything in a corner. When she saw me, she said, "Well, Mom, this isn't your home anymore. I've packed up your things. You'll have to find somewhere else to live before it starts raining and everything gets wet." Emily, why are you doing this? What's going on? Please, tell me what's happening. I was just so confused, not understanding anything. What's there to explain? You already know, don't you? This house is supposed to go to Emily after me. Don't act like you don't get it. Emily said this, and then a big man stepped out from behind her. It was because of him that Emily changed. His name is Ali, and he's Emily's husband. Meeting him changed Emily completely. We were introduced to him as a regular guy who worked at a company. But later we found out he was involved in shady business stuff. When we learned about this, we couldn't understand how our honest Emily ended up with someone like Ali, and we were really worried. Emily and Ali kept us away from them, but a few years ago, they suddenly came to our house and shamelessly asked my husband for money. It shook me deeply, but my husband stayed calm and mentioned a will that even I didn't know about back then. It clearly said that this house would go to Emily and everything else to me. Now that Dad has passed away, the house belongs to Emily, so outsiders should leave quickly. You have no right to live here. Don't pretend you've forgotten. Allie kicked my things aside and sneered, "But you can't just show up here all of a sudden." Seeing my stuff piled outside, I didn't know what to do. I felt completely lost. Now, Ole, don't be so harsh. Mom shouldn't stay here, but we're still family, right?" Emily said this as she came closer to me while I held onto the key. "Don't be so sad. You'll always be my mom. You can use this key to come to the house anytime. Don't feel too down." Then she took the key from my hand and threw it as far as she could. "What's the matter with you?" The key flew through the air and disappeared. I was shocked by Emily's unexpected action. Turning back to her, I said, "I'm sorry about that." Upon closer inspection, I realized that the key was already useless. I forgot we changed the locks earlier. There was no point in you holding onto it, so I threw it away for you. Don't act like I've done something terrible. It's not that big of a deal. Emily and Ole looked at me in disbelief and burst into laughter. Emily's face, now completely different from before she got married, showed that she would do anything for her own benefit. I felt tears starting to form. Then I remembered my husband's gentle smile, as if he was telling me to stay strong. "Emily, I understand what you're trying to say, but you're getting the wrong idea. This isn't the right place to talk. Let's go inside." I urged Emily and Ole to come inside, but they resisted. "We're still moving in, and don't act like you're in charge, telling us where to talk. This isn't your house anymore. You need our permission to come in." Ali snapped back. Faced with Allie's rudeness, I insisted, "We need to discuss this house. It's not yours yet." "I'm just about to explain," Emily interrupted. "I've called someone who can explain it clearly, and he'll be here soon. Let's go inside and have some tea. If you keep refusing, I'll call the police. They'll make me say it again. This house doesn't belong to Emily. If you understand, come inside quickly. If you try anything, I'll be the one calling the police," I said firmly, unsettling them a bit. "Well, it might be the last time we listen to an old woman's nonsense. You're getting old anyway. We'll hear you out this time. But if you talk nonsense, you'll have to pay for wasting our time," Ali threatened, sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed. Emily gave me a similar glare. It seemed like they had threatened people like this before to get what they wanted. This made me feel sad. Soon, the doorbell rang, and I let a man into the living room. He was the lawyer who had been there when my husband shared the details of the will. "You're the lawyer from before, right? What are you trying to say?" "We've seen the will that says this house goes to Emily, and Dad said so." "That's the truth, isn't it?" Ali argued. "As I mentioned earlier, there was a misunderstanding before. The will includes a condition, and if that condition happens, the inheritance changes," the lawyer clarified. "Why are you confusing us with all these complicated terms?" Emily responded in frustration. Seeing their confusion, the lawyer took over to explain. "A conditional bequest with revocation means the will has conditions. In your father's will, the condition was that Susan could stay in the house as long as she's healthy. Emily would only inherit it if Susan couldn't live there anymore due to health issues or passed away. Your father was very clear about this." Ali and Emily looked completely confused. Did he really say that? Even if he did, we wouldn't remember. What's this talk about revocation? Emily shook her head in disbelief. "Okay, then what about those conditions?" Ali asked, sounding a bit shaken but still defiant. "By trying to kick Susan out of the house, you violated the conditions of the will. Because of that, Emily lost her right to inherit the house," the lawyer explained straightforwardly. "Wait, so you're saying I can't inherit just because of that? That's ridiculous." Emily exploded in frustration. "That's the essence of this will. Breaking that condition, whether it's minor or major, leads to revocation," the lawyer explained calmly. "When did we ever break that condition? Can you prove it?" Ali leaned in, clearly trying to intimidate the lawyer. The lawyer cleared his throat. "There was a moving truck outside, arranged by you two, wasn't it? You were trying to move your things in and live here without Susan's consent. Don't act like we did something wrong. We told Mom about it. She just forgot and panicked on her own. That's not our fault. Emily protested. Such childish excuses don't work in the adult world. Not only did you move in without permission, but you also threw my belongings outside. Telling me to leave quickly, the lawyer replied sternly. I never said that. You're the one lying. I can't believe my own mother would make up such accusations. If you keep this up, I'll sue you. Do you want that? Being sued by your own daughter is the last thing you want, right? So take back what you said. Emily threatened, her voice filled with anger. The lawyer remained composed and pulled out his phone. We can't retract the truth. Multiple witnesses saw and heard you telling Susan to leave. We've even recorded their testimonies. He played a video with statements from movers and neighbors. Everyone's stories match. They all say you two told Susan to leave. You could have paid them to say that. How can we trust this? Stop making a fool of us. Ollie accused, but the lawyer ignored him. Instead, he produced a key. Emily, you took the key from Susan and threw it away, which was witnessed by many. I found this key exactly where it was described to be. Changing the locks means Susan can't enter or live here, breaking the condition that she can stay as long as she's healthy. So, you violated the terms of the inheritance. Don't spout whatever you want. If I get serious, I can ensure a lawyer like you never works again. Despite Allie's loud threats, the lawyer remained calm and continued. Therefore, this house will never belong to Emily, and you have no right to live here. Now please remove your belongings and return Susan's immediately. If you delay or try to stay, we'll report a breaking and entering crime to the police. You have 2 hours. Begin now. The lawyer clapped his hands sharply and checked the time on his wristwatch. Police, you say? Such nonsense won't intimidate me, Allie blustered, but the lawyer countered. I'm a professional. This is not a lie. Getting in trouble with the police over this would only cause more problems for you. Even Oli seemed to understand that this wasn't an empty threat. Oh no! Oli and Emily began sweating profusely and quickly got up to start moving their things. It seemed Ole was more bark than bite, like a big guy with no courage. I'm sorry. We'll put everything back right away, so please don't call the police, okay? Please? Emily pleaded sweetly with the lawyer and yelled at the movers outside to reload the truck. But they refused, saying there was no such agreement. In the end, Ollie had to rent a car and somehow managed to load their belongings. Just loading isn't enough. You must put everything back the way it was. If Susan's belongings are damaged or dirty, clean them up. Any damage, and we'll report property damage and seek compensation, the lawyer reiterated, pushing Oli and Emily to restore everything within 2 hours after loading their belongings. After loading their belongings, Emily tearfully asked Oli, "Now that we've packed up, what do we do?" "How should I know? It's because of your dad's strange will," Emily sharply retorted, blaming Oli for not paying attention to the will properly. Despite their argument, they drove off, leaving the scene. I thanked the lawyer profusely and returned to my home filled with memories of my husband, feeling relieved. Later, I heard that Oli and Emily had caused trouble in their previous town and moved to our house, almost like a secret escape. They had targeted me for inheritance money, but now they were gone. Emily, staying with Oli, seemed destined for a life of repeating mistakes. It pained me, but it was the path Emily chose. If they ever regretted their actions and wanted to live honorably, I'd be willing to help. My husband had mentioned something like this. For now, I'll enjoy my time in our shared house, perhaps even trying skydiving, something my husband had wanted to do. Looking up at the stars in the night sky, I felt my husband encouraging me, and I gently wiped away a tear.
Everyone was really excited as my daughter Marissa's wedding rehearsal dinner got going. I felt proud watching her and her fiancé Kevin, surrounded by our family and friends, getting lots of good wishes. But then something unexpected happened. Marissa spoke up, asking for everyone's attention. The room went quiet. My husband Ron and I looked at each other, confused. Marissa raised her glass. "I want to talk about something important," she said, looking right at me. "Elise, you might think of yourself as my stepmother, but to me, you're just someone I don't want in my life." The guests were shocked, and Ron looked really pale. I felt like I'd been hit hard, like all the air had been knocked out of me by what Marissa said. "What's going on, Marissa?" Ron asked, sounding shaky and shocked. "Don't act like you don't know, Dad," Marissa said with a sneer. "You know that Elise has been trying to become a part of our family since the beginning. Well, I'm done pretending she's not my mom, because she never will be." Her words felt like a sharp knife stabbing into me. I looked at Marissa, hoping to see the loving girl I once knew, but all I saw was hatred. "Marissa, please, let's not do this now," I begged, my voice shaking with emotion. "Why not?" she snapped back. "This is my day, and I'll say whatever I want." Ron clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. "That's enough," he said firmly. "We're leaving." Marissa just smirked and turned away, leaving me to face the stares and whispers from the guests. As we walked out, I could feel their judgmental eyes on me, wondering what I'd done to make my own stepdaughter hate me so much. Tears streamed down my face, and I realized everything had changed. In the car, Ron held the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white, his face filled with anger and sadness. "I don't understand what's wrong with her, Elise," he said, his voice strained. "But I won't let her hurt you like this." I just nodded, feeling overwhelmed as we drove away from what should have been a happy night, now ruined. I wondered what had happened to the sweet girl Marissa used to be and what this meant for our family. It's hard to say when Marissa started hating me. Maybe it was when I married her dad and became her stepmom. Or maybe it started even earlier, influenced by her mom, Clara. "Don't worry, honey," Clara had told Marissa, running her fingers through her hair. "No one can take your real mom's place." Even then, Clara's words made me feel uneasy, but I tried to ignore it. I wanted to build a good relationship with Marissa, my new stepdaughter. "I'm not here to take anyone's place," I told Marissa gently. "I just want us to be friends." She nodded, but her eyes showed no warmth or love. It felt like there was a barrier between us, fueled by her mom's hurtful words. At first, Marissa was polite, but distant. But as time went on, her true feelings came out. "Why are you always trying to get involved in my life?" she snapped one evening when I asked about her weekend plans. Ron gave Marissa a disapproving look. "Marissa, don't talk to your mom like that." "She's not my mom," Marissa yelled, her face full of anger. "And I'm tired of her pretending she is." Then she stormed off, leaving me hurt by her harsh words. Ron could only shake his head, looking disappointed and resigned. After that, Marissa's dislike for me was obvious. She'd roll her eyes when I came into a room and make mean comments quietly. If I offered help, she'd reject it rudely, like she couldn't stand being around me. "You're not fooling anyone with your fake kindness," she sneered one day when I asked if she wanted a ride to her friend's house. "Marissa, stop it," Ron said, getting frustrated. But she didn't listen. It was clear Clara encouraged Marissa's hatred toward me. Whenever we saw her, she'd smile sweetly, like she was happy we didn't get along. "I don't know what you've done to make my daughter hate you," she'd say with a fake smile, her eyes filled with mean intentions. "But I guess you'll have to deal with the consequences." And deal with them I did. Marissa's hatred kept growing, like a wound that wouldn't heal, making our family life miserable every day. But I didn't realize then that her hurtful behavior was just the beginning of something much worse. Marissa became even more manipulative and mean after she quit college. Without a plan for her future, she seemed determined to cause trouble in our lives, using her anger to get money and create chaos in our family. "Give me $5,000, or I'll tell everyone how terrible you've been as a stepmom," she said one day, trapping me in the kitchen. I was shocked. "Marissa, why are you saying this? I've tried my best to be good to you." "Forget it," she snapped. "Just give me the money, and I'll leave you alone." I felt desperate as I realized how low she was willing to go. "I don't have that much money right now." "Then you better find it, unless you want everyone to know how bad you are." After that, it happened often. Marissa kept asking for more money, and her threats got worse each time I said no. Ron was stuck in the middle, trying to make both of us happy and wondering why his daughter was acting like this. "Please just give her what she wants," he pleaded with me one night after another big fight. "I can't handle all this arguing." but I knew that giving in would only make things worse. So even as Marissa's threats got scarier, I stuck to my decision. "You think you're so perfect with your job at the high school," she sneered. "Just wait until everyone sees who you really are." Her words scared me. I could only imagine the terrible lies she might spread, ruining my reputation with my coworkers and the students I cared for. Through everything, Clara was always there, silently supporting her daughter's mean actions. "You get what you give, Elise," she'd say when she visited, making me feel even worse. "Maybe if you were a better stepmom, Marissa wouldn't act like this." Her words hurt so much, making me feel angry, betrayed, and lost. But in the middle of all this chaos, I started to feel determined. I couldn't just sit back and let Marissa and Clara keep hurting us. If Marissa wanted a fight, she'd get one. It was time to stand up for myself and my family. I needed to show everyone the truth about Marissa's cruelty, even if it meant doing things I never thought I could do. From then on, I promised myself I'd do whatever it took to keep my family safe, even if it meant doing things I never thought I'd have to do. As Marissa's wedding day got closer, she kept asking for more and treating me worse. It felt like she enjoyed making me suffer, testing how much I could take before I broke down. "I need $3,000 more for my dress alterations," she said one evening, not even saying hello as she came into the living room. Ron looked at me, begging me to give in, but I couldn't take it anymore. "No, Marissa, I've had enough." She acted surprised. "What are you going to do, Elise? Cry to Daddy like you always do." I clenched my fists, feeling furious. "You ungrateful child. Your dad and I have done everything for you, and this is how you treat us." Marissa laughed, making me even angrier. "You're not fooling anyone. You're just a sad, insecure woman trying to buy your way into our family." Her words hurt, but before I could say anything, she said one more thing. "You think the school wants someone like you?" Marissa said, her voice dripping with malice. "Just wait until they find out about your drinking problem." I felt sick to my stomach. Marissa was planning to ruin my career and reputation with lies. "Marissa, stop it," Ron yelled, furious, but she just smirked, enjoying the mess she'd made. In that moment, something changed in me. I felt determined to stay strong against all the hurt and anger. "I'm done being a victim," I said, my voice firm and steady. "Leave and don't come back until you can act like a decent person." Marissa looked surprised by my defiance at first, but then she smirked and leaned in close. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her breath hot on my face. With those words, she stormed out, leaving a tense silence behind her. Ron looked at me, seeming lost. "I'm sorry, Elise. I don't know what's wrong with her," he said, rubbing his temples. But I knew this wasn't sudden. It was years of Clara's influence. As I thought about Marissa's threats, I felt determined. She thought she could ruin my life with lies, but she was wrong. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one, and I wouldn't play by her rules. Marissa's threats kept replaying in my head, making me more determined to expose her true self before it was too late. I knew I couldn't rely on Ron for help. His love for his daughter made him blind to her cruelty. So I had to handle this on my own. That's when Derek came into the picture. He used to be Marissa's boyfriend before she changed. We ran into each other at the grocery store, and we started talking. Soon, everything started to make sense. "She's not who you think she is," Derek told me, looking regretful. "She lied to me about you and Ron." I felt really scared when he told me about all the bad things Marissa did. He said Marissa made up stories about me, saying I was trying to control their family and that Ron was mean to them. He believed her because she seemed so sure and angry. But he only realized she was lying after we broke up. As he talked, I started to see how sneaky Marissa really was. She made up lots of lies to make everyone think badly of me. Her mom, Clara, was the one behind it all. Like she was controlling everything behind the scenes. Derek told me that Marissa's mom has been poisoning Marissa's thoughts about you from the very beginning. I realized, feeling sick to my stomach. She's been putting all these twisted ideas in her head, like you were trying to replace her mom. Everything suddenly made sense. I had been the target of their mean plan all along, made out to be the bad person in their story. But Derek didn't stop there. He said Marissa's getting married for the wrong reasons. Not because she loves Kevin, but because she wants his money and status. Marissa doesn't really care about Kevin, Derek said with a laugh. She's just using him to get what she wants. Once she's got what she needs, she'll leave him and find someone else to use. His words shook me to my core. I had always had a feeling that Marissa didn't truly care, but hearing it so plainly was hard to take. After Derek left, my head was spinning with everything he'd said. I'd been letting Marissa and her mom control everything for too long. But now, armed with the truth, I knew I had to do something. It was time to stand up to them, to show everyone what was really going on. No more pretending to be the victim, no more being scared of their lies. I was ready to fight back. On the day of Marissa's wedding, the air was tense as I watched her get ready. But I was determined. This was the day I would reveal the truth. "You look so pretty, my dear," Clara said sweetly, fixing Marissa's veil with a smile. Just like a princess on her big day. Marissa glowed with happiness, soaking up her mother's praise like a flower soaking up sunlight. But it made me feel uneasy. "Yes, it's like a fairy tale," I remarked, unable to hold back, "with a handsome prince and a mean stepmother." Clara's eyes narrowed. But Marissa just laughed, not seeming to understand or care about what I meant. "Speaking of mean stepmothers," she said calmly, "I'm surprised you came at all. After how you've been treating me, I thought you might skip the whole thing." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, believe me, I thought about it, but I couldn't miss this moment." Before Marissa could say anything, Ron popped his head into the room with a forced smile. "Everything okay here?" he asked. "Just fine, Dad," Marissa replied sweetly. "Elias and I were just chatting." Her tone dripped with sarcasm, but Ron ignored it. "Well, it's almost time. You ready?" Marissa nodded eagerly, ready to make her entrance. As the music started and the doors opened, I took a deep breath, getting ready for what I had to do. The ceremony went by quickly, with vows that felt empty and fake. But when it came time for Kevin and Marissa to kiss, I knew I had to speak up. "Wait," I shouted, my voice echoing in the quiet chapel. "This wedding can't happen." Everyone gasped and looked at me. Marissa's face turned red with anger, her fists clenched. "What's going on?" she spat, furious. I took a deep breath and stared at Marissa firmly. "Marissa, what this means is that I can't stay quiet anymore while you keep lying and manipulating everyone around you." Clara looked pale, realizing what was happening, but I continued before she could interrupt. I showed them all the proof Derek had given me, texts, emails, recordings, that showed Marissa's lies. "For years, you've been spreading lies and turning people against me, pretending to be the innocent one," I said firmly. "But not anymore. It's time for the truth." I showed everyone the evidence, explaining how Marissa had been deceitful and selfish. The chapel fell silent. Marissa's calm facade cracked, and she looked furious and shocked. You're lying," she yelled, reaching out towards me. "How dare you ruin my special day?" But it was too late. The truth was out for everyone to see. As Kevin's family reacted with shock and dismay, it was clear that Marissa's deceit was unraveling before everyone's eyes. She stood exposed, no longer able to maintain her facade. Despite her past actions, I couldn't help but feel a mix of pity and satisfaction seeing her downfall. The truth had been revealed, and I had won not through trickery, but by exposing the darkness hidden beneath Marissa's lies. The aftermath was chaotic, like a bomb had gone off in the room. The silence was quickly replaced by shouts and gasps as people reacted to the truth. "How could you, Marissa?" someone yelled, their anger palpable. "This was supposed to be my special day." "Your special day was built on lies," I retorted firmly. "You can't deceive people forever." Marissa looked ready to argue, but Kevin stepped forward, his eyes filled with hurt and disbelief. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Were you just using me?" For a moment, there was silence as everyone waited for Marissa's response. I almost felt a twinge of sympathy for her. Almost, but then she put on that fake smile and I saw the cold, calculating look in her eyes. "No, of course not, darling," she said, reaching out to touch Kevin's face. "You know I love you so much. Elias is just trying to cause trouble like she always does." I clenched my fists, trying to control my anger. Didn't she realize that her lies were exposed? Apparently not, as she turned her angry gaze back to me. "This is all your fault," she snapped, pointing accusingly at me. "If you hadn't interfered, none of this would be happening." "Stop," Ron's voice boomed, cutting through the tension. We all turned to see him, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "I can't believe what I'm hearing," he said, shaking his head. "My own daughter lying and manipulating everyone for her own selfish reasons. Marissa was silent, unable to respond. For once, she seemed speechless in the face of her father's disappointment. "I don't even recognize you anymore," Ron said, his voice heavy with sadness. "The girl I raised, the one who was kind and loving, she's gone, isn't she?" A heavy silence filled the room as we all absorbed the weight of Ron's words. It wasn't just Marissa who felt the impact, but Clara too. They exchanged a tense look, a silent struggle passing between them. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "Well?" she demanded, her eyes fixed on her daughter. "Aren't you going to speak up, defend yourself?" But Marissa stayed silent, defeated. She looked smaller than ever, a mere shadow of the manipulative person she had become. Clara snorted in disgust, then stormed out, leaving a shocked silence behind her. Kevin's family followed, their faces showing everything from pity to disgust. And just like that, it was all over. Marissa's big plan had fallen apart, leaving her dreams shattered. As Kevin left, looking devastated, I felt sorry for him. He was just another victim of Marissa's games, but any sympathy I had was quickly replaced by a sense of satisfaction. The truth was out, and Marissa had brought it all on herself. There would be no more lies or manipulation, only the consequences of her actions. In the days after the failed wedding, chaos erupted as news of Marissa's lies spread rapidly. She found herself shunned by the very community she'd once hoped to impress. I'll never forget the sight of her at her mother's door, begging for help after her plans fell apart. "Please, Mom," she cried, tears in her eyes. "I need your help. I have nowhere else to go." But Clara looked at her with a mix of disgust and pity. "Help you?" she scoffed. "After what you've done? After embarrassing our family?" Marissa flinched as if she had been slapped. But you're my mom. You're supposed to support me, no matter what." "Support you?" Clara shook her head sadly. "You don't understand, do you? There's no support left. You've pushed away everyone who cared about you with your selfishness and lies." Her words hit Marissa hard, like a punch to the gut. I could see the realization dawn on her face, the weight of her loneliness settling in. You don't mean that," Marissa whispered, her hand shaking as she reached out. But Clara stepped away, her face now cold and distant. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said firmly. "The daughter I knew wouldn't have done what you did. You made your choices, Marissa. Now you have to face the consequences." With those final words, Clara turned and walked back inside, leaving Marissa alone on the doorstep, utterly broken. In the weeks that followed, I saw Marissa's once proud demeanor crumble under the weight of her own actions. The places she used to frequent, fancy bars and high-end stores, now treated her with scorn, whispers following her wherever she went. Even her friends deserted her, not wanting to be linked with her disgrace. Through it all, Ron and I stayed strong, our bond growing stronger as Marissa's world fell apart. "I'm sorry it had to end like this," Ron said quietly one evening as we watched Marissa walk by, looking defeated. "But you were right. She did this to herself." I didn't say anything, just squeezed his hand gently. Words felt insufficient in the face of such a painful situation. As things settled down and our community began to recover from Marissa's lies, Ron and I received an outpouring of support and gratitude. The families we had helped, the students I had taught, they all came together to thank us for standing up against the manipulation and lies that had threatened to tear us apart. In those moments of connection, witnessing human kindness and resilience, I found a newfound peace and purpose that I had been missing during Marissa's tumultuous reign. She tried to tear me down, but it was her own selfishness that led to her downfall, revealing the emptiness beneath her facade. Ron and I would move forward, stronger from the experience. If our story could encourage others to stand against manipulation and embrace honesty, then perhaps something positive could come from Marissa's downfall. I acquired a $50,000 house using the elderly man's funds, and Vivian proudly displayed her bank book, boasting about the purchase. Despite my attempts to maintain composure and avoid surprise, laughter overcame me. In response to her inquiry about my amusement, I continued laughing openly. The eldest son's wife seemingly aimed to leave me speechless, But instead of retorting, I chuckled unabashedly before regaining my composure. I looked at her and with a touch of sympathy uttered, "Sorry for you. My name is Rita, and since marrying my husband, who is a decade my senior, I've been a subject of gossip. He was already affluent, owning multiple companies and substantial wealth. Marrying a significantly older man, especially one with such financial standing, led people to assume I was after his money. However, I genuinely never coveted his wealth. In reality, my husband grew up in poverty after his father's disappearance due to gambling. Living in the same apartment complex where I was the landlord's daughter, we became childhood companions. As a child, I confessed my feelings to him, only to be rejected with laughter and a promise to reconsider when I was older. Even when he moved to New York, we continued corresponding. Despite my repeated confessions, he maintained the stance that I was too young. Our communication persisted even through high school, where he expressed surprise at my continued affection. Upon graduating high school and starting university, I confessed once more, receiving a response that he'd consider my confession once I broadened my perspectives in university. Throughout my 4 university years, my feelings for him remained unwavering. Upon graduation, I confessed again, and this time, he bashfully acknowledged my consistent love. At 23, I began working while he, at 33, garnered attention for his thriving business ventures in New York. Eager to marry, he promised to do so once his company achieved success. Living together at the time, I diligently attended to household chores and prepared his favorite meals, awaiting his return. There were moments of doubt about his feelings, but when questioned, he admitted to initially considering my affection a childhood crush. Surprised by my persistent confessions in high school and college, he began to feel shy and self-aware of his feelings. Despite concerns during my college years that I might find someone else, he assured me he had no time for romance due to intense focus on studying and overcoming his impoverished background. Both of us remained confident that we would never betray each other. We always had a harmonious relationship, even amidst the news of various couples in our circle going through divorces. The concept of divorce seemed distant and irrelevant to us. With my husband amassing a $12 million fortune, some people, aware of our 10-year age gap, assumed I married him for his wealth or speculated about insurance benefits upon his demise. While some understood our long history together since my infancy and didn't jump to such conclusions, there were those who stubbornly clung to misguided beliefs. Despite the occasional gossip during social gatherings, where people assumed my husband had never experienced poverty and unfairly judged us based on societal assumptions about privilege, I remained unfazed. Whenever I noticed disapproving looks from my husband, I'd simply advise him to smile and brush off the rumors. Our love stood steadfast, unaffected by external opinions. My husband had complete trust in me, choosing to believe in our bond regardless of the skepticism around us. Several years into our marriage, we welcomed our eldest son, Peter, followed by the arrival of our second son, Dan, the following year. As a family of 4, we enjoyed financial comfort, yet my husband and I decided not to disclose our wealth to Peter and Dan. Instead, we taught them the value of money from a young age. In elementary school, they earned 10 cents for assisting with household chores, received a monthly allowance of $1, and managed their finances through piggy banks and account books. Despite our financial stability, we instilled in them the unpredictability of the world and the importance of financial responsibility. Both Peter and Dan, influenced by our approach, learned to respect each other's interests. By the time they reached high school, instead of asking for pocket money, they expressed a desire to work for what they wanted. Peter took a job at a cafe, while Dan found employment at a bookstore. My husband and I eagerly anticipated their futures, sharing in the excitement of discovering the kind of people they would eventually choose as life partners. When I mentioned the possibility of them choosing same-gender partners or opting for a single life, my husband laughed, agreeing that their happiness was paramount. We shared a heartfelt laugh, acknowledging our simple wish for our son's happiness, not anticipating the surprise that awaited us when our eldest son expressed his intention to marry someone that left us exclaiming, "You're marrying her? I want to introduce you to the woman I've been dating, Dad, Mom and Dan. I'm considering marrying her in the future." Even after Peter and Dan graduated from university, started working, and moved out of the family home, we made it a point to have a family dinner once a month. During one of these dinners, Peter announced his decision, and both Rita, my husband, and Dan were already in a celebratory mood, expressing excitement about meeting her. That evening, Peter brought the woman in question to our house. Upon entering, she marveled at our home, expressing aspirations of living in such a fantastic house someday. She exclaimed how wonderful it was, and Peter watched her with a fond smile. When we greeted them, she introduced herself as Vivian, mentioning that she works as a model, although she uses a stage name. Curious, she asked if we knew her, and I admitted that I occasionally glance at magazines but don't pay much attention to the models. She nodded in understanding, suggesting that I might be too old to be familiar with the magazines she appears in. I was taken aback when she added that I might not read the kind of magazines she features in, given my age. Despite the initial shock, I realized she probably didn't mean any harm and was merely making a casual observation. She then asked if my marriage was arranged, to which I replied no, explaining that Peter and I had a love marriage. Vivian, in turn, shared that she and Peter also had a love marriage. Surprisingly, she questioned the longevity of our relationship, considering the 10-year age gap. Sensing a comparison between the lengths of our romances, I pointed out the futility of such comparisons and emphasized that we had a love marriage, just like she and Peter. However, she seemed skeptical and brought up the topic of money, insinuating that we might be pretending for financial reasons. Peter intervened, asserting that our parents had a genuine love marriage, evident in the way they are together. This seemed to halt Vivian's line of questioning. When Peter took Vivian home, my husband and Dan were shocked by her remarks, leaving them too stunned to say anything. In the aftermath, my brother's choice of a potential life partner left them appalled and questioning if he would really marry someone with such an attitude. He's a high earner. There must be plenty of other nice women out there. Dan, visibly concerned about his brother, was holding his head. I patted his shoulder, offering reassurance. It's okay, Dan. Peter wasn't endorsing her behavior, was he? He wasn't overlooking her remarks. He must have plans to handle her if they get married. He must genuinely love her to choose her over all the other nice women out there. Despite the complexity of their expressions, my husband and Dan seemed to agree with my words. Our family decided to celebrate the marriage of Peter and Vivian. However, even after the marriage was decided, Vivian made a demand. Since you're the groom's family, you should give a gift of $10,000 per person. Peter silenced her, stating that the standard amount was sufficient. He explained, if we receive that much, it'll look like I'm not earning anything, which calmed down and agitated Vivian simultaneously. As long as Peter kept a firm hand on her, we hoped they could build a good home. My husband Dan and I decided not to worry about their household. Time passed and my husband eventually passed away due to illness and aging. By that time, those who had once thought I married him for his wealth had come to see me as a devoted wife. At the funeral, no one looked at me suspiciously. However, one person's eyes were shining with excitement. Vivian, Peter's wife. She didn't say anything at the funeral, but soon after, she came to our house flaunting a bank book. I've always been stopped by Peter, but this time he agreed with my plan. So it's the end for you now. Confused by her words, I burst into laughter upon seeing the bank book. With that bank book, I bought a house for $500,000 with the old man's money. Watching Vivian proudly show off the bank book, I couldn't help but burst into laughter, realizing the huge mistake she had made based on her words and the bank book in her hand. Despite my efforts to keep calm and not be surprised since my husband's death, I couldn't contain my laughter. When Vivian asked why I was lacking so much, expecting defeat, I just laughed in front of her. After finally stopping my laughter, I looked at her and said, "Sorry for you, huh?" She didn't seem to understand, so I pointed at the bank book in her hand. Look at the name carefully. Confused, she realized it was Peter's bank book. Bursting into laughter again, I couldn't help but find humor in the mix-up. I clarified, the first character of Peter's name and my husband Paul's name are the same, right? As I laughed, Vivian, embarrassed, pleaded not to be laughed at. She had mistakenly thought it was her father-in-law's bank book and even borrowed his ID from a black bag at the funeral. However, it turned out the bag belonged to her own husband, Peter. Despite the mix-up, I managed to buy a house for $500,000 with it. When Vivian questioned if I had $500,000 to borrow a house, I responded, "Well, Peter was with me, so I had him do it." I found the situation increasingly hilarious. Vivian discovered a bank book in her husband Peter's bag, and it seemed she suggested buying a house with the account holder, Peter. Judging by the amount in the bank book, she proposed buying a $500,000 house. Since Peter and Vivian were living in an apartment, Peter might have thought it was time to invest in a house. For Peter, it was merely buying a house with his earned money, but Vivian mistakenly thought it was my husband's bank book and believed she could use it. Not being the account holder, I thought it might be the bank book with my husband's insurance money. The beneficiary of my husband's insurance was me, and normally you can't use the account of someone who has passed away, right? Vivian's face turned red at my words. Then Peter and Vivian's parents appeared at our house. "Ah, I thought you'd be here," Peter said nonchalantly as Vivian's parents, looking pale, came to me, bowing repeatedly. They apologized for their daughter's rudeness. As I was surprised, Vivian's parents explained what had happened. After Peter and Vivian decided to buy a house and completed the contract, an excited Vivian texted her mother, saying, "Got a mansion with the dead father-in-law's insurance money. I'll invite you over once we move in." Now I'm going to brag to the money-hungry mother-in-law about buying a house with the money she was supposed to get. In a panic, her mother showed the message to her father, and they both contacted Peter in a hurry. Peter calmed them down, saying, "Ah, I see," and brought them to our house. I always kept an eye on Vivian, expecting her to mess up sometimes, but I never thought she'd mix up my bank book with Dad's. I didn't think she'd make such a blunder. Peter laughed as much as I did when he realized Vivian's mistake. Vivian's parents told her to apologize, their faces still pale. But Peter and I continued to laugh, creating a chaotic scene. Once we stopped laughing, Vivian's parents apologized and said, "We're truly sorry for what our daughter did." Seeing her parents flustered, Vivian also apologized to us. "Oh, it's all right. In the end, I haven't suffered any harm," I told Vivian and her parents, but they insisted on apologizing. "We know you two had a love marriage and were together before your husband built his fortune. We saw your husband on a TV program talking about how you two met. My wife and I were so moved by your love story," Vivian's parents explained. I exclaimed in surprise as I didn't know anything about it. Peter, sitting next to me, said, "Ah, I thought Mom didn't know." Dad couldn't stand seeing Mom misunderstood, so he talked about it everywhere, and it reached the ears of a TV station. They thought it was a great story and broadcasted how Mom and Dad met. Was that what he was asking about a few years ago when he wanted to tell people our story? "Ah, I guess you did give the okay. I thought it was just for casual conversation." As my face turned as red as Vivian's, who was still embarrassed by her blunder, I realized the legacy my husband had left behind. Our daughter had caused such a disgrace. "If Peter wants to divorce her after this," Peter, looking puzzled, replied, "What? I have no intention of divorcing her even after what she did. Like Mom said, there was no harm done, and I would have stopped her if it looked like there would be. I married her, including her occasional blunders, because I love her. I'll take responsibility for her actions, so please don't worry." Peter said this with a refreshing smile. Vivian hugged him, and her parents were in awe, praising Peter for his kindness. When Dan, the younger son, heard about it later, he said, "I just can't understand my brother's thinking," looking skyward. When I asked Peter why he loved her so much, he said, laughing, "She's never boring to watch." Remembering how he made me laugh during my grief after my husband's death, I felt I understood what he meant. Being with her probably meant no time for minor worries or sulking. Though Vivian did what she did, she's been without an allowance for a while and recently started working at my favorite cafe. Whether she was embarrassed by how much I laughed at her, scolded by her parents, or heard in detail about mine and my husband's love story from them, I'm not sure. But lately she's been calling me ma'am and treating me more respectfully. For a while, I think I'll continue visiting this cafe, watching Peter's wife grow and change. Why did you come to the university hospital? You can't seriously think a doctor can fix being uneducated and poor. Mike smirked, clearly amused with himself. I barely reacted, unimpressed by his arrogance. That's none of your concern, Mike. You're always so aloof. But no matter how prestigious the hospital, they can't cure ignorance or poverty. I didn't even bother with a fake laugh at his weak attempt at humor. Then suddenly, a nurse came rushing toward us. She looked directly at me, waving urgently. "Doctor, we have an emergency. The patient's unconscious and in critical condition. Please come quickly." My name is Jessica, and I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. When I was in elementary school, our father passed away, leaving our mother to raise us on her own. The debt he left behind made it nearly impossible for her to make ends meet, no matter how hard she worked. At her request, I dropped out of high school to take a job at a nearby factory, determined to support my family so that my siblings could pursue their dreams without the burden of financial strain. Everything changed when I turned 18. After several dinner invitations from my supervisor, he asked me if I'd considered dating him. I had already developed feelings for him, so I agreed. Our relationship blossomed, and 2 years later, on my 20th birthday, he proposed. I said yes, and we got married. His name was Mike. From the start, I was honest with Mike about not finishing high school. He assured me, education doesn't matter when you love someone. He always tried to create a relationship based on honesty and equality. Even though he was several years older, he never treated me condescendingly and genuinely valued me. But over time, that seemed to change. His attitude toward me shifted, and he began to look down on me. "Do you even realize who's been supporting your lifestyle? You should be more grateful," Mike said, his voice tinged with irritation. Mike's words made me flinch. When we got married, I left my job at the factory because he insisted so strongly that I become a stay-at-home wife. I had intended to keep working, but he told me, "I want you to take care of the household chores, and I expect a warm meal and a tidy home every day." Despite my worries about sending less money back home, I didn't argue and quit my job. Now, he sees me as nothing more than an unemployed, wasteful burden. "I actually want to work," I finally found the courage to say, but he just laughed at me. "Do you really think any company would hire a high school dropout like you? Your place is here, taking care of our home," he replied coldly. His words struck a chord with me. Maybe quitting my job, just as Mike wanted, had been a mistake. The allowance he gives me has been steadily shrinking, and I know if I complain about the lack of money, he'll probably blame my budgeting skills. So I stay silent and cover the shortfall with the savings I've been carefully building up. As I watched him relax with a drink, the thought of divorce began to creep into my mind. I'm still young. I could end this marriage, start fresh with someone else, and even have children. Mike likely hasn't noticed the depth of my distress, assuming I'm just a selfish, shallow woman. While I wrestled with these cold thoughts and feelings, I found myself trapped in contemplation. The dwindling savings, Mike's growing disdain, and the increasingly tense atmosphere between us. Determined to change our situation, I repeatedly tried to start a conversation with Mike. However, he always managed to find an excuse, claiming he was too tired or had other plans, evading any meaningful discussion. To make things worse, he even told me, "I don't want to talk to someone with such a low educational background." I was at my breaking point. One evening, after cleaning up from dinner, I finally resolved to share my decision with him. The next step was to tell him I wanted a divorce. With my lips dry from nervousness and mustering every ounce of courage, I approached him while he was absorbed in the TV. "Hey, there's something I need to discuss." Hearing the tension in my voice, Mike looked up from his spot with an indifferent expression. I held out the court document and our lawyer's letter, meeting his gaze directly. "I think it would be best if we got a divorce," I said firmly. A deep frown formed on his face. I braced myself for a shouting match, but instead of an outburst, he merely stared at me in silence. I could see his fists clenching and his face turning red with anger. Despite his fury, he held back and didn't let his emotions get the better of him. After a long, tense pause, he finally muttered in a barely audible voice, "Someone with your level of education." His fists clenched even tighter, and his eyes burned with resentment as he glared at me. I instinctively took a step back from his chilling gaze. "You think you have the right to challenge me? With just a high school diploma? You think you can suggest a divorce to your husband?" he shouted, his voice dripping with rage. But I had no intention of backing down. I had endured so much hurt from Mike already. Fighting back tears, I held his gaze steadily. The intensity of my stare seemed to momentarily unsettle him, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Clutching the divorce papers tightly, I showed him my smartphone, where the screen displayed saved messages between him and a female coworker. irrefutable evidence of his infidelity. It looks like you've been showering her with gifts even when you couldn't provide for our household. If I'm so unnecessary to you, then let's get a divorce. Free me from this situation." For the first time, my husband was at a loss for words. He clearly hadn't expected me to have evidence of his affair. Perhaps he thought I'd never discover it. Though he struggled to find a response, his attempt at a smirk was laced with sarcasm. "Living with someone not so bright can be stressful. I need some occasional refreshment," he said, admitting to the affair with no hint of remorse, then turned back to the TV as if the conversation were over. The emptiness of his response was palpable. I swiftly moved to his side and turned off the TV, filling the room with silence. With his disgruntled gaze now fixed on me, I summoned all my strength to steady my trembling legs. I held out the divorce papers again. "All you need to do is sign these. Please, I'm begging you." Why is Mike so resistant to divorce? He despises me, claims to be miserable in our daily life, and yet he clings to the pretense of our marriage while being involved with another woman. Why won't he just leave? I can't make sense of it. If he believes I don't have the right to suggest a divorce, then he should be the one to propose it. I would do anything to distance myself from him. The fear of societal judgment for being served with divorce by my husband and even my own self-worth pale in comparison to my need to escape this situation. "If you want a divorce so badly," my husband said with a sigh, taking the court documents in hand, "then repay every cent of the living expenses I've covered so far. If you can manage that, I'll consider the divorce." That's absurd. It's impossible, right? After all, you're just an uneducated stay-at-home wife. Mike chuckled lowly, clearly amused. "We've been married for 3 years, and during that time, the money he's given me for living expenses has, by even conservative estimates, totaled over $333,000. Although I haven't received much recently, repaying that amount from my savings alone is clearly out of the question. Most of the money went towards monthly rent and groceries, with nothing left for discretionary spending. Despite my efforts to save, I often had to dip into my savings. I couldn't accept his demand. Inside, I was in turmoil. He watched my confusion with a smug grin, and in that moment, a faint spark of determination ignited within me. I was resolved to prove him wrong, and my resolve became unwavering. 12 years later, I found myself standing in the lobby of a university hospital, feeling disoriented. It was my first visit to this facility, and I was lost amid the maze of corridors. The busy staff seemed oblivious to my plight, leaving me stranded. I kept consulting the rough map I held, desperately trying to figure out where I was and where I needed to go. "Is that Jessica?" I suddenly heard my name called from behind. Turning around in surprise, I saw a middle-aged man standing there. I felt a sense of familiarity, but I couldn't quite place him. "I'm sorry, have we met before?" I asked, feeling a bit embarrassed. The man sighed and looked at me with a hint of annoyance. "Do high school dropouts also forget faces? I can't believe you've forgotten the man you used to be married to." As I studied his face more closely, memories began to resurface, bringing back his familiar, arrogant demeanor. Mike. The moment I said his name, my ex-husband settled into a seat in the lobby, looking quite satisfied. "Why are you here at the university hospital?" Mike asked with a smirk. "Surely you don't think a doctor can fix being uneducated and poor." He seemed quite pleased with his own words and chuckled to himself. I remained unruffled by his smugness. "It's none of your business, Mike. You're always so cold," he continued with a sneer. "No matter how prestigious this hospital is, I don't think they can cure a lack of education or poverty." I couldn't even muster a polite laugh at his attempt at humor. Just then, a nurse came rushing toward us. She looked in my direction and waved urgently. "Doctor, we have an emergency patient. They're unconscious and in critical condition. Please come immediately." I stood up immediately and accepted a lab coat from the nurse. Mike's eyes widened in surprise as he watched me. "I'm so sorry about this, especially on your first day here," the nurse said with a bow. There were no other doctors available. She quickly left, leaving Mike to stare after her. I couldn't afford to be distracted by Mike any longer. Not knowing what to do with the hospital brochure I was holding, I handed it to him. Seeing his shocked expression, I simply said, "I'm a doctor." After the emergency treatment was completed, I headed straight to the consultation room. Wandering around the hospital on my own would only leave me disoriented. Even though it was still before my scheduled start time, I decided to begin my work on my first day of transfer. I reviewed the medical chart and was taken aback. As I entered the room, I saw Mike sitting in the examination chair. His expression mirrored my own shock, eyes widening in disbelief. According to the chart, Mike had heart problems and had been referred to this university hospital. I took a deep breath, refocused on my work, and proceeded with the examination. Mike, clearly unsettled, couldn't mask his displeasure. "Is there anything else you'd like to ask?" I inquired as I finished the examination. Mike murmured, "How did someone like you, a high school dropout, become a doctor?" A nurse working beside him looked at him in surprise. Not wanting to waste consultation time, I took a moment to reflect. "My father was a doctor," I began. Just to clarify, I didn't drop out of high school due to poor grades. Memories of my father came flooding back. He was often away, preoccupied with work, and much of his earnings went towards alcohol and nightlife, leading to significant debt. Despite his flaws, I owe a lot to him. His commitment to my education played a crucial role in my path. From a young age, I aspired to follow in his footsteps and never wavered in that dream. I excelled in my studies throughout elementary and middle school, and my mother always believed in me, saying, "Jessica will surely become a doctor." After my father's death and the need to start working right after middle school, my journey took a detour, but I kept learning diligently. I obtained my high school diploma and pursued medical school. But there's no way you had the money to go to college. My earnings were saved by my mom, and I also took advantage of scholarships, I replied. "Scholarships? For you?" His disbelief stunned a bit, but I quickly composed myself and met his gaze. "You used to mock me, calling me a middle school dropout and questioning my intelligence. That was just because you didn't know the whole story." Mike glared at me, his eyes filled with anger. As the nurse whispered that the consultation time was almost over, I turned to prepare the medical chart for the next patient, casting a final glance at Mike. "Regarding the living expenses you wanted me to repay, I can pay them back right now, even double if you prefer. My current income exceeds yours." Mike's face turned crimson, clearly struck by my words. His pride seemed deeply wounded, and his anger was palpable as he breathed heavily. Realizing this was a public consultation room with medical staff bustling around, he stood up abruptly with a loud thud. "Just wait, you failed, doctor. I'm filing a complaint." With that, Mike stormed out of the consultation room. I watched him leave and let out a heavy sigh. Despite my physical exhaustion, I felt a surprising sense of relief. It seemed Mike had initially sought treatment at another facility but was eventually referred to the university hospital where I work. With a scowl on his face, he had returned to see me. After our divorce, Mike's life had taken a nosedive. The female coworker with whom he'd had an affair had rejected him, and rumors about his infidelity and our breakup had spread throughout his company, leading to his resignation. The blow to his pride was compounded by being turned down by 2 women. His alcohol and cigarette consumption had increased, which he carelessly suggested might have contributed to his heart problems. He was scheduled for major surgery soon, and while I did feel a twinge of sympathy for him, I couldn't completely forget his behavior during our marriage. Regardless of my personal feelings, I remained professional and committed to providing him with the best medical care. Mike still comes to my clinic for regular checkups. At one point, he even asked if I would consider remarrying him, but I politely declined. For now, I have no intention of remarrying and am content living with my family at my parents' home. It may sound boastful, but I'm well regarded as a doctor and earn more than enough to support my family. My days are busy and fulfilling, but occasionally I look back on our married life with a sense of emptiness.
Someone called me from a number I didn't recognize. Who could it be? I wondered aloud as I picked up the phone and said, "Hello." The voice on the other end responded, "It's me, Kevin, your son. Look, I get that you and Dad aren't together anymore, but you need to start acting like a mom. I'm in high school now, and I can't keep dealing with your problems forever, okay?" Confused, I asked, "What do you mean? Why are you calling me?" Kevin's tone turned sharp. "I'm telling you, you need to pay my child support and school fees, and do it soon. It's because of what you did, cheating and all, and now you're trying to get money from Dad. You're out of your mind." His words made me angry. "Kevin, who is this? I never had any children." "What? Are you kidding me? Are you in denial?" He shot back. "Stop playing games." Kevin must think I'm joking, but I'm serious. Like I said before, Kevin isn't my biological son. About 14 years ago, I was married to my ex-husband for about 3 years. During that time, our relationship didn't change much, and I thought we got along pretty well. We often went out together on our days off. My ex-husband had a busy job that required him to travel for work about half of the month. I knew about this from the beginning, so I wasn't too worried about it. The only thing that bothered me was the topic of children. Before we got married, I really wanted to have kids soon. We both had our own plans and priorities though. Even though I thought having kids was the right thing for us, I didn't want to push him if he wasn't ready. So I was patient and didn't rush him into anything. After 3 years of marriage, my ex-husband hadn't mentioned having children, which started to bother me. Finally, I brought it up one day. What do you think about starting a family now? 3 years have passed, and waiting longer could make it harder for us to have kids. Yeah, but work is really hectic right now. When will it not be hectic? Seriously? You've been saying that forever, and we're still in the same place. I understand work is busy, but if you keep using that excuse, it makes me wonder if there's more going on than just work. What do you mean by that? I haven't done anything wrong, I said, feeling confused. The conversation felt strange. I didn't suspect my ex-husband of cheating, but I was concerned that things might start to seem suspicious. However, his reaction made me think otherwise. He's keeping something from me, I thought to myself. With that in mind, I decided to investigate. As I looked into his words, actions, and his behavior when I questioned him, I discovered the truth about what he was really doing on his business trips. It wasn't just cheating, it was much worse. My husband was living a double life. Half the month he was with me, and the other half he was with another family. The most shocking discovery was that this other family included a child. That child turned out to be Kevin. Did you just call me? Kevin was only about 2 years old then, too young to fully grasp what was happening. It was a situation with mixed feelings, fortunate and unfortunate at the same time. Knowing someone would get hurt, I decided to talk to the other woman later. She seemed to have heard about me from my ex-husband, nodding slightly when she saw me. From our first meeting, she didn't come off as particularly friendly. Amidst the tension, we quickly got to the point. I brought up everything that troubled me, whether it was acceptable for my ex-husband to lead a double life, and whose child Kevin really was. Without any hint of regret, she calmly answered, Carly, confidently stating she was Kevin's mother. It seemed my ex-husband had kept this a secret from me, but she had no qualms about it. I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the situation. Finally, I asked her what her plans were moving forward. I'm not planning to change anything in my life now. I'm fine with how things are, she replied. Besides, I don't think he's interested in having more children. Why do you say that? When I told him I was pregnant with Kevin, he didn't seem happy. He said it would have been better if the timing had been different. So my pregnancy was more of an accident. Otherwise, I don't think he would have wanted a child. But he told me he loved kids. Doesn't that mean he wanted a child with you? She smiled faintly and said, Isn't that strange? If that were true, why did I, who wasn't keen on having a child, end up giving birth, while you, who wanted a child, didn't even conceive? Can he truly say he loves children? Well, I'm sure he said he loved kids, but maybe it was just something he said to impress you. Perhaps he used it as an excuse to get close to you. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't find the words. It felt like she had hit upon something true, and it made me question whether my ex-husband had been sincere about wanting children despite his actions saying otherwise. In the end, I started to believe the other woman was right. I felt powerless, like the best I could do was seek compensation. She seemed calm about it, which only made me feel worse. A few days later, I filled out divorce papers and handed them to my husband, telling him I would also be seeking compensation. He probably heard about it from the other woman. My husband accepted everything without questioning me. What was the point of it all? Why did this man even marry me? There was only one thing I couldn't stop wondering about. On the day I packed up and left, I asked my ex-husband, Why did you marry me? I just don't understand. I'm not sure either. I often wonder why we got married in the first place. If we didn't even know, maybe we shouldn't have. Yeah, maybe. If we hadn't, you wouldn't have to deal with a divorce now. But hey, you married me because you liked me, right? We both made a mistake. Let's move on to a better life now. Thank you for everything. Same to you. I'll pray that I don't choose someone like you in my next life, I said, and then we got divorced. I became single again, changed jobs, and moved to a different state, aiming for a fresh start. It was a valuable experience for me to approach everything with a new mindset. My ex-husband occasionally contacted me for paperwork, but we never discussed our current lives. Maybe he wasn't interested. He had his own life, and I had mine. About 10 years passed without us keeping in touch. Then unexpectedly, I received a call from Kevin. I was curious about the reason, but it turned out he was asking for child support and school fees. Kevin is the child born from my ex-husband's affair. Naturally, I have no legal obligation to pay, but he wouldn't accept that. Don't you feel ashamed as a mother? If that's the case, then don't have any children, he kept repeating. It was frustrating to hear the same thing over and over. I didn't want to escalate things, so I waited for him to calm down. Finally, after a few minutes, I managed to speak up. Can I say something? There are a few things I need to clarify. How did you get my number? It's obvious. I got it from Dad. Our family hasn't been doing well lately, and things seem strange. Eventually, we couldn't afford tuition and other expenses. Because of that, I had to start working part-time. Dad said it was all your fault. That's when I started hearing different things about you, Mom, that you cheated on Dad and left without fulfilling your promises to pay. Until then, I hadn't asked much about the divorce, but now it all made sense. It's all your fault, he concluded. I see. I finally understood why he was so angry. If what he said was true, any kid would be upset. But my ex-husband had lied to Kevin, and unbelievably, he had turned Kevin against me. Hearing this made me furious. It's a hassle for my ex-husband to reappear in my life now that we're divorced. However, it's also heartbreaking to see Kevin being misled like this. From my point of view, he's a stranger, but I couldn't just ignore the situation and walk away, saying it's not my problem. After remarrying and having children with my current husband, I felt a responsibility as a parent to do the right thing. Kevin, now 16, seemed old enough to hear the truth. Kevin, everything I'm about to tell you is the truth. If you need proof, like a DNA test, I can arrange it. Can you listen to me for now? I asked. Yeah, Kevin replied hesitantly. As I revealed each detail, he grew increasingly agitated. If what you're saying is true, why did Dad have me call you earlier? Kevin asked, confused. Kevin, you mentioned you're working part-time. What are you doing with the money? I inquired. Saving it for me. Our family's been struggling financially lately, and I wanted to help out with debts. High school isn't mandatory anymore, so I don't need much, he explained earnestly. You're such a responsible kid. But have you ever wondered why, with that money, you can't cover your tuition and expenses? Well, sometimes my phone bill payment is late. I think Dad might be short on money. Is he working right now? He's working. He goes to the office regularly. I see. I have a bad feeling about this. Could it be that my ex-husband is using Kevin's money? With that suspicion in mind, I decided to look into my ex-husband's activities once more. Kevin, can you give me about 3 weeks? Haha, sure, that's fine. And please don't tell Dad about what we talked about on the phone, okay? Okay, I won't. So I decided to investigate my ex-husband further. I hired a private investigator and waited anxiously for the results. Some might say I'm going too far, but everything I do is for Kevin's sake. I wouldn't go to such lengths for anyone else. Even if people think I'm crazy, I don't care. Would I abandon a child who looks like he's on the verge of collapsing right in front of me? Absolutely not. I refuse to become that kind of person. Above all, I felt a deep anger towards my ex-husband for deceiving Kevin. Filled with this anger, I waited for the private investigator's report for 3 weeks. When the results finally arrived, I was shocked and furious. It turned out my ex-husband wasn't currently employed full-time. He was working as a temporary worker and had recently been laid off. Instead of actively seeking new opportunities, he was spending his time idly drinking or playing cards. Kevin believed his dad was working because he often dressed in a suit, but the truth was he was unemployed and not actively searching for a job. What angered me most about my ex-husband was how quickly he acted remorseful in front of Kevin. Seeing his dad like that, Kevin felt sorry and willingly handed over all his part-time job earnings. Little did Kevin know, his money was being squandered on gambling and drinking by his father. This situation couldn't be ignored. First and foremost, I needed to take action to help Kevin. With that in mind, I called my ex-mother-in-law, relieved that I hadn't deleted her number from my phone book. Hello. Oh, Ava, it's been a while. How have you been? Long time no see. What's on your mind? Is everything all right? I explained the current situation to my mother-in-law. During my marriage, she and her sister-in-law had been at odds with me. After the divorce, we hadn't kept in touch. However, it seemed she had heard about my divorce and understood that I had moved on with my life, so she wasn't upset at all. I see. I'm sorry I didn't mention it earlier. I thought it would be better coming from him, but he was cheating, wasn't he? My mother-in-law's voice took on a somber tone. As I shared all the details, she let out an angry exclamation over the phone. I understand now. It all makes sense. I wasn't informed about the birth because he had a child with someone else. He brought Kevin to see me, but I was told not to contact you because you needed space after giving birth. Some people go through mental instability or even illness during that time, so I respected your privacy. When I found out about the divorce, I felt sorry, but I didn't know how to reach out to you. Is that right? Now Kevin visits occasionally, and it brings me joy. Regardless of how he came into this world, he's not to blame. I want to support him and be there for him in the future. You've always been understanding. I'm actually relieved to hear you say that. I called because I wanted to ask you something about Kevin. Could you and your husband help raise Kevin together? Of course. Kevin worked so hard to earn money from his part-time job, only for it to be wasted on gambling. I think it's crucial to have a serious talk with him about that. I trust you to handle it, but I believe Kevin is sacrificing his future to support his father. Please let him live freely with you and his grandfather. My mother-in-law assured me that she would take care of Kevin, and thus his immediate situation was resolved. Now it was time to confront my ex-husband. I decided to contact him and arrange a meeting. I was furious at him for deceiving me. When I arrived at the cafe at the agreed-upon time and saw my ex-husband, he looked noticeably worn out. It's unusual for you to reach out to me, and wow, you look older. Anyway, what about Kevin? So you already know. Let's get straight to the point. Why did you have Kevin call me? What were you trying to achieve? I was desperate. Money's been tight lately. I lost my job due to a fraud accusation, and Kevin's mother disappeared out of nowhere. It feels like everything's slipping away from me, but my mom and Kevin still think I'm employed. It's easy to fool them as long as I act remorseful. Kevin is your son, right? Doesn't it make you feel something? He's such a dutiful son, giving me money. You won't find a more devoted son than him. I understand now. I feel relieved hearing you say these things openly. Suddenly, 3 people stood up from a nearby table and approached us. Huh? What's happening? You're truly despicable. We overheard everything just now. Even after all this time, your character hasn't changed. It's over for you. It was my mother-in-law, my aunt-in-law, and then Kevin. To convince everyone, they needed to see his true nature with their own eyes. My ex-husband started to visibly flounder, unable to find the right words. As everyone chastised him, he kept glancing at me, seemingly seeking help. But even if you make that face, it won't change anything. You need to accept responsibility for everything you've done and recognize how disgraceful your actions have been. And with that, the incident came to a close. Since then, my ex-husband faced criticism from my mother-in-law, aunt-in-law, and father-in-law. He was pushed to find work and eventually secured a job at a construction site through my father-in-law's connections. My father-in-law insisted it was to straighten him out. Moreover, he arranged for child support to be deducted directly from his wages. This ensured that Kevin's tuition and other school expenses were covered. Kevin has since been living with his grandmother. While I remain deeply disappointed in my ex-husband, he has apparently shown kindness to my mother-in-law and father-in-law. Kevin continues to be a kind-hearted child through it all. I'm still uncertain if my actions were entirely justified, but there's no denying things have improved. My greatest wish is for Kevin to find happiness. As my mother-in-law wisely said, a child born into this world bears no guilt.
The move is finally complete, yet Charles, my father-in-law, utters his disdain without bothering to address me by name. His usual arrogance is unmistakable, and though he doesn't explicitly call me out, it's evident he's directing his words at me. I've endured his attitude until now, but I've reached my limit. As I paused from wiping the table, I shoot a defiant glare at Charles, who doesn't even bother to meet my gaze. I'll be out by today, I declare, and Charles responds with a mocking laugh, reveling in his satisfaction. His words cut deep, branding me as a mere parasite and trash. He envisions a life refreshed once I'm gone, oblivious to the profound changes his own lifestyle has undergone over the years. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Grace, and I recently turned 40. I'm married to William and currently residing with my in-laws. Despite several years of marriage, we remain childless, and there's no intention or possibility of having children. The harsh truth about William's infertility surfaced shortly after our marriage registration. Had I known from the start, I might have reconsidered our union. The revelation struck me like a pit of despair. All our dreams of building a happy family together were shattered. William, with apparent sincerity, had discussed our future children, even contributing to naming them. Little did I know, it was all a facade, a betrayal concealed beneath the guise of a promising future. Despite the profound disappointment, divorce wasn't a simple option for me. We had committed to being a family with the in-laws, who we considered our parents. Reporting a divorce a day after joining the family felt like a breach of trust. Living with the in-laws only intensified the inevitable question of when we would have children. Upon revealing our infertility, the in-laws reacted with fury. To them, a woman unable to bear children was deemed useless and deserving of immediate expulsion. Charles, my father-in-law, took the lead in treating me as a servant, stripping away any semblance of dignity. In their house, I was perpetually relegated to eating alone in the kitchen. I became part of the leftover disposal crew once the in-laws and William had finished their meals. No matter how much effort I put into cooking delicious food, all I received were the scraps left behind by them. Since getting married, I hadn't enjoyed a single satisfying meal. My weight steadily dropped, and within 6 months of marriage, my wrist bones were protruding. Initially, mother-in-law Madison bore the brunt of Charles's tirades, but once I joined the family, his focus shifted to me. Madison seemed relieved by the change. She smiled more often. William once remarked that she felt relieved not to be Charles' target anymore. Despite never smiling around Charles, Madison's demeanor improved in his absence. Charles's tyranny extended beyond targeting me. Upon learning of our infertility, he commanded me to work from dawn to dusk, deeming me lacking as a woman. I had always intended to work after marriage and had no desire to prolong my stay in their house unnecessarily. Balancing early morning chores, seeing everyone off, and heading to work proved challenging, but having a job with flexible hours helped. Despite my efforts, Charles discarded my food without tasting it, citing its appearance as the reason. Neither William nor Madison complained, choosing instead to remain silent. Despite my grievances, conversations during meals were sparse, and I often wondered if they truly enjoyed eating in silence. I had no choice but to maintain a facade of harmony with the in-laws, playing the role of a dutiful wife. As someone without parents, the weight of divorce seemed unbearable. However, Charles's demand that I contribute all my earnings to the household expenses crossed the line. While I intended to contribute, his insistence on full control over my earnings felt absurd. Protesting was futile. Charles's decisions were absolute. It seemed easier to comply, appeasing him and sparing myself the sight of Madison and William's saddened expressions. The root of the marital issues lay with Charles, whose oppression and torment overshadowed everything else. While Madison used to manage the household finances, the responsibility fell on me after marriage, a task I found overwhelming. "Isn't this too much for Grace?" Madison dared to question, only to be silenced by Charles's authoritative command to shut up. I have been dismissed in Charles's eyes, and Madison and I, as women, were deemed worthless, stripped of the privilege to voice our opinions. Taking over the household ledger from Madison initially shocked me, but after several years, I grew accustomed to it. Perhaps the acceptance stemmed from having an additional breadwinner in the house. Charles, however, began spending more recklessly, justifying it as work-related expenses, increasing his nights out, and embarking on trips with Madison and William, excluding me. This sudden change in their behavior marked a departure from the past. Despite the years that had passed, Charles continued to treat me as an outsider, labeling me a parasite or trash. In my younger years, I endured the peace that came when Charles wasn't home, not minding my role as a mere housekeeper. However, as I approached 40, I found his behavior intolerable. The fear that once kept me silent waned, and I started speaking up. Charles didn't appreciate my newfound assertiveness, leading to resentment and a worsening negative loop. Our strained relationship reached a point where Charles constantly badmouthed me, and our interactions were minimal. Whenever he spoke, it was to insult me, creating a dreadful atmosphere at home. Despite the escalating tension, I refused to comply when Charles demanded I leave the house. I snapped back, questioning where I could go knowing I had no parents. Charles, fueled by anger, slammed glasses onto the table, breaking them in the process. Tired of enduring the constant yelling, I deviated from my usual apology and spoke sharply to Charles. I pointed out that he should calm down in his older age. Unaccustomed to such defiance, Charles became furious, asserting his dominance as the master of the house, declaring that a wife like me shouldn't have opinions. Frustration reached its peak, and I confronted Charles head-on, expressing my years-long desire to be treated like a human. He retaliated, escalating to grabbing me by the collar and vehemently declaring that a person like me wasn't needed in his house. The force of his words was enough to shake the furniture, and in that moment, I was pushed away. I should have offered an apology right then and there, but I could no longer contain my frustration. "Fine, you want me to leave. That'll make you happy, right, Charles?" I looked up at him, unable to stay silent any longer. "Yes," he spat out, condescendingly looking down on me. "Then I'll do it," I declared. He stormed off to his room with a loud noise, and I, now a bit calmer, started cleaning the living room that Charles had dirtied. Madison came to check on me with a worried look, but she left without saying anything, returning to her room. I felt like I had no place in this house anymore. Neither William nor Madison would protect me, and years of endurance exploded, making me feel even more isolated. The next day, as usual, I got up early and began my routine. Charles woke up and entered the living room, sitting on the sofa, leaning back and spreading the newspaper without even glancing at me. Then, without looking up, he asked, "Finished moving yet?" There was no way I could have moved out so soon after yesterday's events. I didn't even think he was serious. I thought it was just a drunken outburst, not something he meant. This was about leaving the house, right? "When will you leave? You have no right to live here anymore," Charles said, still not looking at me. I stopped wiping the table and turned to face him. If he was serious about wanting me to leave, then I would respond seriously. "I'll be out by today," I declared. Madison, who was listening nearby, froze, her worried gaze falling on me. It was clear that once I left, Charles would target Madison again, and she didn't want me to go. However, Charles insisted on my departure, and I had no other option. Charles laughed loudly, likely satisfied that he was getting his way. I rushed out of the living room, quickly packed my things, and left the in-laws' house. I hadn't decided where to go, but I felt liberated. I sent a message to William, who was already out, asking him to divorce me. A lawyer would contact him, and then I turned off my phone. Over the next few days, I found a lawyer and had them contact William and the in-laws. Charles, thinking divorce was inevitable, pressured William into signing the papers quickly. Despite William's reluctance, he signed the agreement under Charles's glare. I signed in front of the lawyer, and the divorce was finalized. We completed the distribution of property, and I was able to claim a settlement for Charles's harassment, which I had recorded. It was worth paying for a lawyer instead of fighting alone. Charles, concerned about his public image, avoided any complications by involving lawyers. Knowing exactly how much money Charles had from managing the household finances, I suggested an amount he could just about afford. With the property distribution and harassment settlement paid in full, I started a comfortable life in my own apartment. I used to hate being alone before marriage, but after living with the in-laws and getting divorced, I embraced the newfound freedom. I've grown to appreciate the solitude of my own time. Cooking meals for myself, I relish the tranquility without anyone raising complaints. About 3 months after the divorce, Charles persistently calls, and though I assume it's nothing positive, I choose not to answer. However, a momentary lapse results in me accidentally picking up. "What have you done to my house?" Charles's voice booms through the phone. Instinctively, I move the device away from my ear to endure the loud onslaught. I respond, "I haven't done anything. I left the house as you instructed." Charles remains unsatisfied, continuing to yell. He's upset about notifications regarding issues with withdrawals, blaming me for the problem. I calmly assert that I didn't alter anything and adhered to his instructions, managing and paying everything due. As the realization of why Charles is angry dawns on me, a grin widens on my face. I'm glad he's not here to witness it. Charles, incredulous, questions the financial aspects, asking how much I earned. I recall never revealing my salary details to him. $45,000 take home, I respond. Charles reacts with a sound akin to a squashed frog before falling silent. In truth, my job in sales at an investment trust company involved a commission-based salary, influenced by the returns generated for investors. Unfortunately, much of it vanished due to Charles' extravagant spending. However, I had wisely invested the inheritance from my parents, bringing in some income. Although not substantial, it covered living expenses. During the property distribution, only William's savings were considered since my parents' inheritance and its earnings were not part of it. Charles, insistent, questions whether the standard of living before marriage was the same. As I press on, he begins to get angrier. In the midst of his tirade, I couldn't help but laugh at his absurd demand. With Charles yelling to keep contributing money to the house, I retort, "You're the one who ruined it. Why should I, no longer a family member, give you money?" I chuckled half-heartedly, and amidst my laughter, I heard something shatter on the other end, another one of Charles's tantrums. The realization that I no longer had to clean up after his outbursts made me almost wish he would break more. We were strangers now, no longer family or anything remotely close. I urged him not to act like family and advised him to manage his own finances, leaving him just enough to get by. With that, I bid him goodbye and ended the call. I anticipated more calls, but none came. I thought maybe he was remorseful, but it became apparent that wasn't the case. Perhaps he felt ashamed for not being able to make payments and resorted to ordering William and Madison to borrow money from financial institutions, plunging them into further debt. While payments were made, their unwillingness to change their lifestyle perpetuated the cycle of accumulating more debt each month. I learned about this when William pathetically contacted me, even expressing a desire for reconciliation. Furthermore, William proposed cutting ties with Dad and getting back together. However, such a suggestion seemed hypocritical coming from someone who never stood up for me against Charles' harassment. Despite choosing to stay with William, knowing we couldn't have children, he never protected me. Returning to him was not on my agenda. Charles might have felt suffocated, but that was no longer my concern. I wish they understood the consequences of their actions and endured the suffering now. The in-laws struggled with debt, yet they couldn't bring themselves to reduce their lifestyle standards. Charles, now a contract worker with a reduced salary, joined Madison and William in part-time security jobs. It wasn't just Charles, it was also Madison and William, persisting in maintaining their living standards despite being at their limits. I used to be desperate to protect William, but now I lived for myself. At 40, having children might be challenging, but I remained open to the possibility. Before the divorce, waking up felt like a chore, but now I woke up feeling refreshed, eagerly anticipating a better future in my new life.